Howdy, howdy, everybody.
Howdy, everybody.
Oh, this can't happen.
Everybody.
Oh, this can't
Howdy.
happen. All right, howdy now. I was just checking the Prime Discord because I wanted to know if he was doing all black everything, which would mean that perhaps Fanatiq would be busy. But we planned it. 9 p.m. Central, which is coming up. 7 minutes. We're going to be talking about OJ. For those of you who are already in chat, welcome. Good to see you. And if you have any thoughts on OJ, let me know. Give me some takes, some thoughts, some questions you may have for yeah, some questions. The cancer did it. Cancer got him. I think I'm gonna do a poll here. How do I start a poll again? There's some way to do it. All right, I got a poll in chat. No, I'm not. I don't think I'm muted. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, I think you can hear me. I hope you can hear me. I'm currently chilling in Fanatiq's Discord, waiting for him to pop on in. Oh, that's right. I'm gonna have to minimize my internet. All right. So I got a poll. Did OJ do it? Everybody, get your answers in. It's only 10 minutes. While you're getting your answers in, I'm gonna go piss. I did just do that probably 2 minutes ago, but I pee a lot. I return. I swear if it takes OJ and motherfucking Simpson for me and Lactoid to agree on something. Well, we'll see. I mean, we'll see what Fanatiq's arguments are. Um, Hello? Can you guys hear me when I say that hello just now? Oh, did Blue Fear already give me... Oh, that was the last 3 days. Gotcha. Okay, you can hear me. So, I didn't have push talk on, so good thing I didn't say any terrible slurs that get picked up by the mic. That's damn good. So Fanatiq wanted to have a discussion. He advertised this to me as a discussion. He said he wanted to chat about it. He reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, Lactoid, let's. How much do you know about the OJ?" And I said, "I don't really know anything because I didn't." And he said he wants to have a discussion on it. So I read the Wikipedia. So now I'm a Destiny level expert on the OJ trial, and we'll see how much of this is a discussion compared to how much of it is a yelling match. Hopefully it's a discussion. I hope to have a discussion. Based on my review, I think OJ did it. But Fanatiq, I understand, is more skeptical. And believes that OJ did not do it. Okay, well, he labeled his stream "Debate with a Lawyer," so it's not a discussion. Debate with a lawyer about O.J. Simpson's verdict. Okay, so I guess we're already here for the confrontation. I like it. I think he's gonna notice me in his server, his room. Let's open up his stream, see what he's up to. Maybe he's watching my stream. That'd be fucking weird. I'd be watching his stream, he'd be watching mine. I feel off, by the way, guys. I ate really old noodles with really old meat, so I think I'm feeling okay, like mentally, but I am like gonna. My stomach don't feel so good. Lactoid, is that actual denim you're wearing? It's more than denim. No, Cal Mike. It's FUBU. I'm wearing FUBU. For us, by us. This is a FUBU jacket. It's got Muhammad Ali in the back. Sounds racist. Oh yeah, if you're a 90s teenager, then you would be FUBU educated. How you guys doing? Just generally speaking. Let's see here. Did O.J. Simpson do it? Wow, my entire chat. 4 votes so far. Yes, beyond a reasonable doubt. 4 votes. 0 for everything else. Damn. All right. You guys ready to have debates about preservatives? Because that's what a lot of this is going to come down to, I promise you. EDTA. So either he did it or the cops framed him, because that's what the defense said. You actually have to believe the affirmative question of the cops framed him. What do you guys think? You think the cops would ever frame him? O.J. Simpson? I don't know. They're racist, you know. They're LAPD, racist people. You could get arrested for wearing something like that on a dark night. Maybe. But I'd look good, though.
Yo.
Yo, I saw that name of the room that you pulled me into. Why am...
Wait, no, you didn't see. Well, you didn't even see it.
Yeah, I did. Why don't I get the privileges to be in that room? I like that room.
Well, now, you know what that room is for, and you don't qualify, bro.
Whoa. What possibly would I need to qualify to be in that room?
Well, for one, you need to be real. And then the second one, you need to be... Well, we'll just stop at real.
All right.
Be real.
There was a second word in there, though. I can't say it, but I just wanted to know. Let me know if I'm ever welcome.
Listen, if that ever changes, I got you, bro. I got you. Well, listen, I'm happy to be having this conversation with you. I think, yeah, man, this is one of those things that I've been talking about for a long time. I have tweets that like date back to like 2016. I was around for it when it actually happened. I was just rather young. My mother talked about it quite a bit after reading the Johnny Cochran book, and so I think, I do think that it's worthy of discussion. I just most of the time I found that like I would always ask people for any evidence of OJ's guilt, and the answer was always, "Oh yeah, I think he's guilty." And then I would ask them, "Okay, did you actually follow the case?" And I never found anyone who actually followed the case who could actually still say that they believed OJ Simpson was guilty. And so eventually I started tweeting, I don't believe that there's any person out there who actually watched but genuinely believes that OJ is guilty. Now I could be wrong. I could be wrong, and I'm open to it. I'm hoping you'll be that the one that can maybe show me that I that he's yeah. So let me I'm just setting up the stream at the last second. I gotta because I can't.
But here's I got some bad news though for you. I didn't watch the whole trial. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Yeah, you don't have to.
I did read the entire Wikipedia though, so I'm pretty, Destiny level versed on what's going on.
I hope you're joking. I hope you're joking, bro.
I even read the Wikipedia articles that were connected to the main Wikipedia article. That's how good I am, okay, Fanatiq?
I'm
ready,
bro.
I'm ready.
Not like this. Not like this. Okay, so look. So let's start. So let me ask you first. Do you believe that OJ Simpson was guilty of murdering those people?
I do. I think it's good to and when we're talking about a criminal trial, I think it's important to ask, I guess, the two questions of: do you think he did it, just like informally, but also, do you think that he should have been found guilty? Right?
Okay.
I would say yes to both of those questions. Where I stand right now, but maybe you can convince me. I'm open.
Oh, I don't know. We'll see. Man, that's crazy. Okay, I don't think I can convince you of one way or the other. I think it's the opposite, right? Because to convince you that he shouldn't have been found guilty would be to prove a negative, and that's a little bit more difficult, right? Whereas for you to be able to convince me that he actually did it, that seems like that would be more reasonable, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? Because to convince you that he did not do it means I have to prove that he did not. That's proving a negative. I have to find a way of being able to say that. And even if I give you all the reasons why I don't think he did it, unless we have some sort of airtight alibi that says he was literally in an opposite country or something like that, it's really difficult to do. Whereas the onus is, on the inverse. Like, what is the evidence that you believe he's guilty from?
Sure. Ultimately, the burden of proof is always going to be on the prosecution. I think both of us would have to agree there's at least some evidence pointing to his guilt. I mean, you might not think it's enough, or you might not think it's like powerful enough evidence to show that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. But surely you would agree there's some evidence that would indicate that he killed Nicole Brown and Goldman.
I don't believe so, but that's why I'm here, and maybe you can help me. What evidence do you think there is that he killed them?
All right. Well, where do you want to start? So Nicole Brown and Goldman were killed brutally in Nicole Brown's home. I understand that. Bill, if we want to start from the very beginning, not the very beginning, but there was a whole bunch of times. I think there was 63 roughly instances of claimed abuse from Nicole Brown. 8 phone calls, and one of which got O.J. Simpson arrested. And this led to a divorce. I think it was in February of 1992. And then at some point, O.J. got with a new woman. And then the night of the murder, they went to see their kid's dance recital.
The day. It wasn't at the night. It was earlier in the day.
Sure. following which it was O.J. Simpson and somebody he was with, Cato Kalin, who's an actor and a family friend of O.J. Simpson. They went to McDonald's, and then Nicole Brown at some point went home. There is a missing period of time in which Simpson does not have an alibi, specifically the time period in which Nicole Brown was killed. And when they found her, there was blood everywhere. There was a glove that was located on the premises. There was bloodstains leading out the back fence. When they went to OJ's house, there was blood. There's all sorts of blood on the door of his Ford Bronco. There was blood inside of his car, Nicole's blood and Goldman's blood. There was blood in the backyard. There was the bloody glove. There was, a lot of blood. And okay. I think it all kind of points to his guilt.
Okay. So when you mention the blood, obviously blood everywhere, blood on the Bronco, blood on the glove, blood on the scene, all of those things seem like that would be overwhelming evidence, right? Mm-hmm. It just seems like that should be crystal clear. What is your reasoning? One, what do you believe what was the defense's strategy with dealing with the blood? And two, what do you believe made the jury ignore that blood evidence?
So this is, I'm just going to just say how I feel. And like I said, I'm willing to have my mind changed. And maybe I won't say such strong statements. But what I think this was, after my reading, is a generally naive and unintelligent jury who was able to get manipulated by some incredibly intelligent people. Specifically the defense team, right? There was red herrings that were thrown around all over the place. There was misinformation. There was misdirection. There was some bold-faced, incorrect things being said about, for example, preservatives in the blood to the jury that the jury, I'm guessing believed or at least created some aura of doubt that really shouldn't have been there. And they were able to do it just because they were so skilled at speaking and countering the prosecution's overwhelming evidence.
Okay. I think so. If we look at some of the things that they were saying to the jury, what was their primary thing for what was their primary defense?
So we're about which specific claim. So a lot of the defenses were the sort of speculation that the evidence was planted, right? There was no real evidence that the evidence was planted by the cops, but that was sort of the direct statements being made by the defense. They, despite the fact there was I think 100.
1 second, hold on. Somebody's playing some music. I gotta just for a second. 1 second.
Do we really know whether or not someone's playing music, or maybe it's maybe it's fake music? Maybe it's preservatives mixed music.
Okay, sorry, my nephew's a producer, taking after his uncle.
I like it.
Okay, so you said I'm sorry. Go ahead and continue.
It depends what we want to get into, right? So there was 108 exhibits of DNA evidence, including 61 drops of blood. 2 of them were claimed to be tainted through the presence of a preservative, and they were claimed that the reason this had a preservative in it was because the DNA that blood was planted. I think it was on the back gate and on and then I think on the glove as well. Now, the claim is that the presence of this preservative makes it likely, or at least puts doubt, that the cops took blood from OJ, used a preservative to basically bring it to the crime scene in the tube, and then disperse it at the crime scene to frame OJ using that blood.
Well, typically, whenever they draw blood, then it immediately is given to toxicology, right? Which is literally just upstairs at that place. And so it should probably take about 5 minutes from the drawing of the blood to giving it to toxicology for them to have the blood and be able to scan it and, do all of that. Um, that wasn't the case with the OJ blood, though, right?
Right. The dude like held onto it for like more than an hour for some reason.
Not only did he hold on to it, he immediately went to the crime scene
Back
with
to
it,
the crime
right?
scene. Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So then he went back to the crime scene with the blood that instead of going straight to toxicology with it, which is completely against protocol. And then after being at the crime scene for multiple hours with the blood, when they finally put it into toxicology, wasn't there the admission that some of the blood was missing from toxicology?
I think it was like 1.5 milliliters was unaccounted for.
1.5 cc's. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So then 1.5 cc was missing from the blood after being at the crime scene for multiple hours. Do you think that's strange at all?
I mean, it's definitely worth like looking at. I think it like that's like the only point that when I was reading, that's like the only point that I think you can look at where it's like, well, why the fuck did you do this? And I think that was some mishandling. Probably should not have done that. I'm not convinced that just because there was some missing, especially when you consider that there's different reasons why the blood could be missing.
What?
We also, well, so for example, if you're using pipettes, some of the blood can remain within the pipette. There could be blood residue coming from the amount on different materials that the lab was using that could
No, no, no,
make
no,
up
no.
1.5 cc.
That's inaccurate. So with the lab before it was in use, the lab when they first get the blood, they then take the vial and then they record how much blood is in the vial. And there was a discrepancy from how much blood was drawn before the blood had been tested, studied, or used, and then how much blood was drawn. So that's what they had. How much was filed and how much was drawn, and there was a discrepancy of about 1.5 cc's.
Right. So this is what I'm reading right here. Fano Paradis testified he drew an undocumented amount of blood from Simpson. When the defense asked him to estimate how much he drew, he stated approximately 8 milliliters. Records from the testing lab show that only 6.5 milliliters could be accounted for, and the defense claimed that 1.5 milliliters were missing. During the rebuttal phase, Paradis testified again and clarified he believed he only took 6.5 milliliters, as the records show. So
Okay.
he could have been, when he said approximately 8 millimeters, he could have been
Nope.
fucked up.
So let's get into that approximation as someone who followed the trial. See, in that situation, they asked him very much, how much blood did you draw? And he said, about 8. And they said, okay, about 8? And he said, well, it could have been 8.1. It could have been 7.9, but it was 8. And they said, are you sure it was 8? He said, I looked at it and I've been doing this job. He had been doing that job for quite some time. And he was very, very confident, 100%, that it was 8 cc's. So as they questioned and grilled him about how much it got, he said he remembered 100% that it was exactly 8 cc's. I'm sorry, or approximately. Could have been more or less 7.9 or 8.1, because obviously, when you're doing to the naked eye, you get it. But that's what he was doing. And so he eyeballed it and was sure that it was 7.9 to 8.1. So approximately 8 cc's, with maybe 0.1 cc, more or less, right? That approximation. You can't get from 0.1 to 1.5 cc's missing. And that's what ended up being missing after they left to the crime scene with all of that blood. So
did they hold him? So when he said approximately 8, because I mean, I'm sure this could happen where someone could say, yeah, approximately 8, and then it's only 6.5. When they said like 8, was there any records to document that it was 8? Or did the records document that it was 6.5 that was drawn?
the records documented it was 6.5 because that's what toxicology did, but he said that it was 8, and they asked him to clarify because he said approximate. Was it approximate? Like how close? And then that's when he said it could have been 7.9 or it could have been 8.1. So the approximation is within zero point 0.1 cc's. That's a big discrepancy from 8, approximately 8. Well, with like I said, with a more or less zero point 0.1 cc's to get to 1.5, right? So that's where that happened. How do you explain that?
I mean, I'll have to watch his testimony in particular to see how, like, when he was saying 8, how he said it, what he specifically was saying.
He was very confident.
The fact that he uses the word approximately thinks he actually wasn't all that confident, though. So I'll have to watch it. But it's also possible he's wrong. It could be 6.5, and he could have remembered it as 8.
Okay, that's a possibility. But again, when you say it's approximate 8, I want to make sure that he did specify what the approximation was, right? So, like what the deviation could have been. The deviation was about zero point 0.1 from his estimate because knew that job and did it very, very well. So, when we say approximately 8, it's not that, oh, it's approximate. So, he could have saw 6.5 and estimated 8. That's not what happened. What he did was he said it was 8, and then when they asked him to clarify on the approximation, he said 7.9 to 8.1. So the deviation can't be as great as 1.5, right? That would be 15 times what he said the deviation could have been.
Right. Give me 1 second. Yeah, like I said, I'll not gonna say rewatch because I haven't watched it. I will watch the specific testimony that he gives as to um, that discrepancy, because I would agree that if and this would be a great, for the defense, right? If you're holding someone's feet to the fire and they only drew 6.5, but for some reason they're saying 8, you bet your ass I'm gonna be, using that and grilling the fuck out of them. So,
Yeah.
sure. So he testified there was approximately 8, when in reality there was only 6.5.
Yes, and then of course the hours that they spent at the crime scene with it, and then of course the evidence that there was blood poured on a sock. That well, no, let's not get to the sock yet. Let's get to the ones on the gate because you were right. There were two different samples. I think it was like 113 and 114 that were found at the gate, and they were able to look at those, and that was able to be positively identified as O.J. Simpson's blood. But the problem with that blood was that preservative thing that you were talking about. That blood, first off, was there's multiple problems with it. One, that blood was discovered 3 weeks later. Now, why did they need samples 113 and 114 if they had 112 other blood samples that were in evidence that they weren't that they didn't use, they weren't able to use? Why did they need 113?
It'd be 59 because there were 61 drops of blood that were part of the DNA evidence. And there was
Oh, you're right.
There was 108
Yeah,
exhibits of DNA evidence total.
yeah.
The extra drops of blood, I'm guessing they were just getting more evidence.
Wait, but why did it need to be those two specifically? Are you aware?
Those two, why it needed to be? No, I don't know why it needed to be those two specifically. Why?
No problem. I'll explain it. So the reason is because the other blood droplets, were exposed to what they call environmental degradation. So obviously, when you have like blood chilling out in the elements, then the biological material within the blood sample will begin to degrade just for simply existing. And so all of the previous blood samples that they had tested had um, they had environmental degradation. And of course, since the biological material degrades, then you won't be able to test it to positively identify it with any individual. And so, of all of the samples they had tested up to that point, none of it could be associated with O.J. Simpson. And so they weren't able to connect the blood. Then, 3 weeks later, Detective Fong goes back to the crime scene and then finds new blood samples. And those new blood samples do not have the environmental degradation, have a significantly higher DNA count, and then uh, and of course they had the presence of EDTA. Those new blood samples, though they had been out in the environments, literally sunlight can do it, bacteria can do it, any of those things will break down this DNA. But these new blood samples that were discovered 3 weeks later didn't have environmental degradation. Can you explain that to me? And were on the exact same surfaces as the previous blood samples. Can you explain that to me?
Why are you saying that the other blood samples couldn't be read because of environmental degradation?
Well, because so when you have certain levels to a certain level of environmental degradation, they couldn't associate those blood samples with O.J. Simpson. So they ran those blood, and then they weren't able to tie that blood directly to O.J. Simpson. The samples that were able to be positively identified as O.J. Simpson's blood were samples 113 and 114. I believe those were the numbers. I can look it up right now if you need me to. The previous ones could
Yeah,
not.
so that's not true. That's just a disagreement we have. So the blood that was collected initially, and you can Google this, right? Like, environmental degradation can happen, but it takes over like the course of months for DNA to degrade within blood samples, even or blood stains, even including like in relatively extreme conditions. Those two that they selected were specifically cherry picked by the defense because every single other blood sample showed that tested positive for O.J. Simpson's blood. If it was degraded, it would have just tested inconclusive. The defense lied essentially and said that it was degraded to the point where it was unreliable. But that's not how it works. It's just not true.
No, that's actually not true. As Barry Scheck said in his examination of Dr. Fong, I wish I had that timestamp on me right now. We would be able to watch it right now. Barry Scheck very clearly demonstrated that the blood had, I think he said it had 100 times the DNA count of some of the other samples, and that it was completely absent environmental degradation. The previous blood samples weren't able to be tied to O.J. Simpson, which is why they revisited the crime scene in the first place. They literally went back 3 weeks later, and then they found these new blood droplets, and the new blood droplets were on the same surface as the original one, and they were discovered by Detective Fong. That part is not contested. This is just a fact. As somebody who actually watched the case, you're reading something that's telling you that's not the case. But I watched it myself with my own eyes, and I had that testimony. I could probably find it, but I know for a fact that that's exactly what happened.
So one of the defense's witness, Gerdes, for example, was testifying. Clark implied that it was not a coincidence that the 3 evidence items he initially said were valid were the same 3 the defense claimed were planted, while the other 58 were all false positives, and the 47 substrate controls, which were used to determine if contamination occurred, were all false negatives. Those 58 all tested positive for O.J. Simpson's DNA.
Wait, are you talking about the things that they tested like months later after the trial, like later on once they like had gotten advanced DNA technology? Because originally they were saying that those things. Okay, so yeah, look, I can't really argue with you on this because I'm just 100% right here, and I don't. We're just arguing about the facts here. The fact of the matter was that they did very clearly state that the original blood samples did have environmental degradation, and that environmental degradation did not give them enough DNA. It didn't have a high enough DNA count. Let me make sure that we're just clear about this. Was there a very clear disparity, sometimes to as high as 100 times, as far as the disparity in DNA count from the blood samples that were discovered by Detective Fong at the later date and the previous blood samples? Yes or no?
I don't know the level of DNA that was in the blood samples, but I'm reading right here.
Okay, wait, hold on. That was
wait,
one.
Wait,
Then,
let me respond fully. Testing was. Hold on. According to the blood.
Hold on.
Let me speak. Let me speak. Because this is
Lactoid,
important.
I'm letting you speak, but if you're not going to answer, okay, I'm asking a very specific question.
I answered.
But I had obviously these things were working together in composition. So I'm asking you these 3 things about this blood all together, right? Because I mentioned 3 things in conjunction. You're saying you disagree. So now I have to work through all 3 of those things independently to figure out which of the 3 do you disagree. So the first thing that I mentioned of the 3, you said you don't know anything about. So now I'm moving to the second of the 3 to figure out if you know anything about that. Was there stated environmental degradation on the blood, and was there a difference in degradation between the 2 samples as stated by both the prosecution and the defense regarding the blood samples? So we already went over the environmental. Okay, so you're unaware of that as well.
No, I just don't believe it, right? Because when I'm reading,
it's not about a belief. I'm asking you, so you're unaware of that because that did happen.
So from what I know about environmental degradation, there wouldn't be significant differences in environmental degradation between the course of 3 weeks. Secondly, right here, testing was cross-referenced and validated at 3 separate labs using different tests with no discrepancies found. The prosecution offered the defense access to the evidence samples to conduct their own testing, but they declined.
Yeah, no. The testing that you're talking about, again, we're talking about 2 different things. Testing was offered for the lab for the new blood samples discovered by Detective Fong because the original show me any. You're reading that right now. Good, link me that.
Yeah, it's right off the Wikipedia right here. Like okay. Over 9 weeks of testimony, 108 exhibits of DNA evidence.
Good, link it.
Sure.
And you're telling me that the Wikipedia specifies which specific samples where the testing was done on 3 different labs? It does that?
Yeah.
I know it doesn't, but okay, let's see that. You linked it?
Where do you want it?
In chat or DM, anywhere.
I'm putting in your general chat.
Okay. Okay. Check claimed that one drop of blood on the back gate in Nickel was planted by the police. As evidence, they offered the blood-containing EDTA preservative found in purple tubes used for blood draws. It was collected several weeks later on July 3rd rather than on the June 13th, and 1.5 milliliters in donated. Okay, whatever. The officer, where this is the part
You're
that was
reading the top
highlighted that you
part?
sent me.
Okay, ignore the highlighted part. I don't know why it highlighted a part.
And then just keep going. It's further down.
No, the top. Over 9 weeks of testimony, 108 exhibits of DNA evidence, including 61 drops of blood, were presented at trial. Testing was cross-referenced and validated at 3 separate labs using different tests with no discrepancies found. The prosecution offered the defense access to the evidence.
Where are you
samples
reading this?
Off the Wikipedia article I just sent you. DNA evidence in the O.J. Simpson murder case.
Yes, the Wikipedia like has over 3,000 texts. Which section? I don't see it.
Very first paragraph.
Okay, I got you. I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead. You can read it.
Over 9 weeks of testimony, 108 exhibits of DNA evidence, including 61 drops of blood, were presented at trial. Testing was cross-referenced and validated at 3 separate labs using different tests with no discrepancies found. The prosecution offered the defense access to the evidence samples to conduct their own testing, but they declined.
Okay, so Lactoid, I'm asking you again, where does this thing that you just read, that I just read with you, where does it specify that this testing that gave this verification was on every single sample, every single drop, or where does it specify which drops it was? Because what I said and what I stand by as someone who actually watched the trial and got my information not just from Wikipedia is that the original blood that was tested was inconclusive because of environmental degradation and because of low DNA count. Then the new ones that were discovered months later, that blood was the one that was able to be tested that ended up giving the new conclusion, right? The blood that was discovered on July 3rd, that blood that had less environmental degradation, and that blood specifically was positively associated with O.J. Simpson, and that was the blood that was given to different labs where it was verified to be O.J. Simpson's. That's what I'm saying. Where is the evidence? You're saying that no, it was the old samples, and I don't believe that you know what you're talking about. I was sure you were wrong, and this Wikipedia doesn't seem to validate what you're saying at all.
It absolutely does. I also linked you a different Wikipedia article. That's the murder trial of O.J. Simpson. If you scroll, you can search the word false, 2 out of 4. So the actual claim, when Gertis was being cross-examined, the 58 were all false positives. He's alleging that 58 of the blood samples that were tested were false positives because that's, other than the other 3 that they're claiming were tampered with, because there were 61 blood samples total, 58 where there was no credible allegation of the defense that they were tampered with, and all 58 of those tested positive for DNA match with O.J. Simpson and Nicole.
So then if the other 58 were all positively matched, then why did we need new discovery of new blood on July 3rd by Detective Fong, and why were those the samples that were being contended if we had 58 other samples that were all conclusively O.J. Simpson's?
The reason those were the ones they were being contended with was because those were the ones that the defense attorneys focused on in order to misdirect the jury into focusing on those, because they were taken later. So they were easier targets to make allegations of interference and contamination, as opposed to all the other DNA, such as taken from his Ford Bronco, such as taken from his house, such as taken from the crime scene, that included that was valid, completely valid, and the defense didn't even challenge it, that showed positive matches with O.J. Simpson. And that's just the blood, by the way. That doesn't include, No, we
don't want to move on to other things.
Sure,
we just want to stay with the blood.
Sure.
Yeah, we're right now, and then we'll move on to other ones, and you can give your next argument.
Yeah.
I think we can pretty much conclude it with this. I contend, and I believe this is the truth, and I'm pretty sure I will find resources to be able to come to that point. We can revisit this conversation as well if you would like, and I'll have those resources specifically for that.
Sure.
That absolutely, that the blood that was originally discovered from the crime scene, I believe it was around June, in mid-June, there was blood that was discovered in the crime scene there. that blood had environmental degradation and therefore was not able to be positively identified with O.J. Simpson. Afterwards, once they couldn't, that blood wasn't able to be done, then they went back to the crime scene and discovered brand new blood samples. And those blood samples were very obviously, again, it was planted. And the reason why we know it was planted is for three reasons. One, the blood was completely absent any environmental degradation. Two, and these blood, and after being out there for even longer than the original blood. Two, hold on. Wait. Just one thing really quick. I just need to make sure that we're crystal clear here. You were saying that environmental degradation takes months, right?
So there's studies that indicate that you can still pick up DNA months after in bloodstains, but even if it does become degraded to the point where you can't test it, it wouldn't give you positives for O.J. Simpson. It would just register as inconclusive. But it wasn't registering as inconclusive. It was registering as O.J. Simpson's DNA.
That's not true. Okay, and then so
It is true.
yeah. So I mean, as a person who actually watched the trial, I know what I'm talking about, and it's absolutely
Can I read
not.
something? So right here, if you scroll up in the Wikipedia, DNA evidence and blood trail. Simpson's DNA found on blood drops next to the bloody footprints near the victims at the Bundy crime scene. The prosecution stated the probability of error was 1 in 9.7 billion. Simpson's DNA was found on a trail of blood drops leading away from the victims towards and on the back gate at Bundy. The prosecution claimed the probability of error was 1 in 200. Simpson, Goldman, and Brown's DNA found on blood on the outside of the door and inside Simpson's Bronco. The prosecution stated that the probability of error was 1 in 21 billion. Simpson's DNA found on the blood drops leading from the area where his Bronco was parked at Simpson's Rockingham home to the front door entrance. Simpson, Brown, and Goldman's DNA on a bloody glove behind his home. Simpson and Brown's DNA found on blood on a pair of socks in Simpson's bedroom. The prosecution stated the probability of error was 1 in 6.8 billion. I've just read more than 3.
Okay, so let me explain. When we're talking about all of these blood of these different places, first we were talking about the blood of the gate. Now you can try your best to gish Gallup into guilty by just pointing out different blood samples and other things that haven't been contested, which is what's happening there. But what we can say for sure is the blood on the gate was planted. And then I'll address the rest of it too. The blood on the gate is planted, and here's the way we also know that the blood on the gate was planted, because originally there are photographs that are taken of the crime scene. These new blood samples that are directly next to old blood samples on the exact same gate were shown to Detective Fong, and they were asking from these original photos, where are these new blood samples? They weren't there. So then they asked him very specifically, where is it? And he said it doesn't appear to be in the photo. They had multiple angles of this blood, of these gates, of these things, because it's a crime scene and that's what they do. And they were able to find that the original photos taken did not have those specific blood spots. And then later on, new photos taken after a new investigation of the crime several weeks later, were these new blood samples, which they were able to identify. Those blood samples, then they were in the photos, but they weren't in the original photos. And when they very directly questioned Dr. Fong, was it Dr. Fong? Whenever they questioned, Dr. Fong or Mr. Fong specifically about that, he was not able to identify the person who discovered the photo. Could not tell you where those drops were in the original photo because they weren't there. That's number one. Number two, the blood. I've already mentioned the environmental degradation. Number three, the presence of EDTA. So let's talk about that for a second. The FBI brought in their own witness who testified, actually to the defense, that the blood was consistent with the reaction of EDTA being present in the blood. EDTA is a preserving agent, and it can be found through detergents. Sometimes you could even absorb it through fruit and things like that, but it's very, very, very little trace amounts. It would be in parts per billion, because as they said, parts per million would never be found in a living person, because that would be pretty much lethal. And so what O.J. Simpson's blood had was parts per billion of EDTA in it. Did you read anything about that? Or are you reading it right now?
No, I read all about it. So I'm going to respond to the different claims, though, right? So, quote, the defense suggested the reason why Fong did not collect the blood is because there was not there that day. When shown a blown-up photograph taken at the back gate on June 13th, he admitted he could not see the blood. That's what you're talking about. The prosecution responded that a different photograph showed the blood was present on the back gate on June 13th before any blood had been taken from Simpson's arm. Robert Risk was the first officer at the crime scene and the one who pointed out the blood on the back gate to Furman, who documented it in his notes that night. Multiple other officers testified the blood was present on the back gate the night of the murders. The prosecution also pointed out that the media cameras present proved that Vanetter never returned to Brown's home that evening where Simpson's blood was allegedly planted. Apparently, there had testimony and notes and a different photograph showing that there actually was blood on the back gate as early as June 13th, which was prior to them taking the blood from Simpson's arm. This is just another example of the defense taking one photograph that doesn't appear to show the blood, blowing it up, and then using it to misdirect the jury. So that's my response to you bringing up the fact that the
can I
photograph...
address that thing, or no? You want to go through all three first?
I would like to go through the things that you said.
Okay, that's fair. And then we'll deal with just one. I got you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
The second thing, you just sort of reiterated environmental degradation, which I've already said. I mean, there wasn't evidence that the DNA was degraded. All of it, again, tested positive. It wasn't inconclusive, which is what you would get if you test a DNA sample that is degraded. You can just, like, very simple Google, like, research on how long it takes for DNA in blood to degenerate beyond being able to be tested. And it's like significantly longer than 3 weeks, even in pretty harsh conditions, which that area is not particularly harsh. The EDTA, this is also just a disagreement we have. It actually is present in humans in parts per million. I found 2 studies that indicate this, one of which was actually from the EPA that was cited by the prosecution on cross-examination. And the guy who was saying, well, if it's in parts per million, he would be dead. So, parts per billion is like the correct amount. They showed him that. He said, well, that's not right. That must be a typo. And then they got a certified copy from the EPA showing that actually, yes, EDTA can be found in human blood naturally in parts per million. It is present in detergents and food, especially preserved food like McDonald's, which he ate earlier that day. And one of the agents, for example, actually tested his own blood. It was Agent Martz. As an example, he tested his own unpreserved blood, and he found parts per million of EDTA, which disproved Ryder's claim. And Ryder's was the one who was saying that actually, if it's parts per million, you'd be dead. But if that was the case, then Agent Martz should also be dead when he tested his own blood and found own unpreserved blood as an example and found parts per million.
Okay, so let me address the first thing that you're saying when, in response to the idea that yes, there were several officers that testified that there was blood on the black gate. Someone saw it, and Mark Furman wrote it in his logbook. There was blood on the black gate, and there was a photograph of blood on the back gate. And I'm never disagreeing with that. And it feels like that's what's happening very frequently. What I'm saying is there was blood on the back gate, and the original blood that was on the back gate was inconclusive, which is why they needed to find new blood on the back gate. It was on the exact same surface. The number of the sample that I'm talking about that was on the back gate, let me make sure I have it. I believe it was, I think it was 117. I might have been wrong. I think I called it 113 earlier. Let me find it one more second. Yes.
I am going to ask you for proof that it was inconclusive, the blood from that back gate.
So it says the original blood samples, there were 2 blood drops that were found July 13th. It was 116 and 115. And 116 is, there were 3. It's 115, 116, and 117 discovered by Detective Fong. 117 was directly next to previous blood samples. And in those blood samples, the previous ones were inconclusive. And then these new ones were the ones where they discovered it and they weren't present in the photos. So simply making this statement, I'm sorry, because I'm reading and making sure that I'm trying to get it together.
Can you send me what you're reading?
I'm just reading. I just wrote, where is it, Mr. Fung, July 3rd, 115 blood drop found by Fung. And it's just my own notes that I collected just for information
I get that,
to jog my memory.
But you're saying that there was the DNA tests for that were inconclusive. I'm asking you, which DNA tests were inconclusive?
That was stated inside of the trial. It wasn't something that I read. It was something that was stated vocally.
Can you point, I understand that perhaps I just didn't have time for this. I didn't watch the entire trial. But
of course, it would be impossible.
Right. So if whether it be now or whether it be in the future, I'll give you that courtesy. I would like to see some evidence that it was inconclusive.
Find statements of people directly in the trial stating that it was inconclusive and that it didn't have environmental yieldings. Sure, I can do that for you. That'll be no problem.
Okay.
Okay.
Just curious, do you know who exactly said it was inconclusive?
Barry Scheck. All right. So what I was saying is that July 3rd, there were 115, or is it Gary Sheck? I'm terrible with names. I know his last
Barry.
name is Sheck.
It's Barry.
It is Barry.
Yeah, I remember
Okay. All
I
right.
remember reading about Barry. I'm looking him up again.
There we go. Yeah, I'm so terrible with names. I always doubt myself. July 13th, you found blood drops 115, 116, and 117. So simply pointing out, hey, by the way, there's evidence that there was blood in the back gate doesn't indicate the very specific drops that we're talking about here. Specifically 115, 116, and 117. Those were ones that were positively identified with O.J. Simpson, but they weren't there originally. When shown photographed, because in a crime scene, literally every time they put the little yellow notepads or the little indicators to indicate what specific number of evidence this was. And these were evidence pieces 115, 116, and 117 discovered by Detective Fung. However, there are previous pictures because there were other blood samples that were on that same gate. And those previous blood samples that were directly next to these ones, they were showing him those photos from the original date of the crime scene. And on those photos, he could not identify 115, 116, and 117. He didn't see them. So then when he was asking, here's the same thing, we're blowing it up. So here's the crime scene. There were indicators that were easy to trace. There was a really big black dot that wasn't blood or anything else. It was just a discoloration that was on the gate. Then you have that, and so then you can say maybe like a few inches away from that black dot is where this blood is. So now we're blowing it up and we're saying the blood isn't there, but it is there in the future photos. But we have evidence of this. So now we're asking you, where is this? So simply trying to say, yes, the officers mentioned there was blood on the gate. Detective Furman wrote there was blood on the gate. Doesn't speak to the very specific droplets which were obviously planted and had the EDTA and weren't able to be discovered in the first 3 days. That's what I'm saying.
First of all, Barry Sheck was one of the attorneys. It wasn't like he wasn't an expert. Attorneys are obviously going to say all sorts of shit. I mean, we are zealots who are tasked with zealously advocating for our clients. If an attorney says, well, it's inconclusive, of course an attorney's going to say that. That doesn't really carry any kind of scientific credibility.
That was also said by other experts as well, too.
So I'll if you give me their names, I'll also look at them as well, right? But
I don't remember their name, but I'll find it.
Sure. So I'm looking at the thing you're referring to. He did not see a blood drop on the back gate in a photo from June 13th, despite collecting blood from that spot on July 3rd. However, later the prosecution found a photo that showed that blood was there on June 13th. Fung also said he could not see blood on the socks that he collected from Simpson's bedroom, but that was only visible under a microscope. So every single thing that Barry Sheck was grilling Fung, who admittedly was probably kind of a poor orator, couldn't really explain himself super well, as is typical with forensic investigators or scientists. That doesn't mean that what Barry Sheck has said is correct, because there was a different photo that was presented later by the prosecution, showing that the blood was there. Also, that blood, I think you might be agreeing with me that blood did test positive for Simpson's DNA, or are you saying that? Okay, good.
Yeah,
because
the new blood from July 3rd. Yes,
sure. Because the 61 drops of blood all tested positive for Simpson's DNA. Otherwise,
they did not.
Well, otherwise they wouldn't have brought them into the trial.
They did not. So first off, here we go. I'm glad that at least now you just read it for yourself, that there were new drops of blood.
That's not what I read.
Wait, you just... I'm sorry. What,
later, later the prosecution found a photo that showed the blood was there.
Give me the link. So
it's literally, it's
give me the link.
Yeah, I already sent it to you. Yeah. The first link that I sent you, the DNA...
Oh, the Wikipedia?
Mm-hmm, DNA evidence in the O.J. Simpson murder case. If you look up Barry, so it'll bring you down on the first 1 out of 7 to Dennis Fung, where Barry was examining him. Right here, later, the prosecution found a photo that showed the blood was there on June 13th. And then that has a link to it.
Okay, let me see. Okay, let me read it. The cross-examination of Fung. Okay, criminal Dennis Fung testified from April 3rd to 5th, April 11th, 14th, April 17th. He testified to how the blood evidence was collected from the crime scene from the white Ford Bronco and Simpson's home. He also testified that Detective Philip Van Etter gave him Simpson's reference vial of blood when he was at Rockingham. The cross-examination of Fung by Barry Sheck lasted 9 days. Sheck's aggressive questioning, along with Fung's unusual willingness to volunteer confusing information while answering, made the prosecution scramble to explain his answers. He said he did not see a blood drop on the back gate in a photo from June 13th, despite collecting blood from that spot on July 3rd. Later, the prosecution found a photo that showed the blood was there on June 13th. So here's what happens.
Yes.
If the prosecution found evidence or found photos that showed that the blood was there on June 13th, then they could have easily brought Detective Fung in there and had him identify that. They can claim that blood was there, but they found those, they had photos and they had multiple photos, and the blood was not there in those things. And the detective who discovered the blood sample couldn't identify it. So I think in the same way that you're saying that you guys are, that defense attorneys are zealots and things like that, so is the prosecution.
No, they showed the photo.
So if the prosecution had that photo, they could have had that been confirmed with Dr. Fung, but they did not during his cross-examination.
No. They put out the photo and they did show that the blood was there on June 13th.
Did they show that to Detective Fung?
So they showed it during the trial. I don't know specifically.
Did they show it to the Detective Fung?
So I would bet they did, but I know they brought it up at some point during the trial, showing that the blood was there. So you're saying
they did not.
Okay, we're gonna look at this. I think you're wrong on this, but they for sure had a photo showing that blood was there. That's what we both just read together.
Okay, and what I'm saying is they did not show that to Detective Fung, the guy who discovered the blood. Let me just make sure that we're crystal clear here. Detective Fung is the detective who discovered and noted the blood. The defense, in cross-examination, very clearly asked him, here's original photos of this scene that you collected. You collected this blood from this gate. And where is the blood? We're specifically referring to samples 115 through 117. And on that day, he could not show or identify those blood samples. Now, the prosecution later on going and making the statement, well, here's photos that show the blood. That's a different thing. And I don't know. If the original guy who discovered the blood wasn't able to find that blood, then I think that says a lot right there. He's the person who found the blood and he can't identify it in photographs, and it wasn't even noted, right? Because if it was something that was seen in the first one, it wouldn't just be a drop of blood. It would also be noted. There would be the sticker next to it like there was all of the other samples, but there was no sticker next to any spot, and that spot was empty as demonstrated by multiple photos to Dr. Fung. So if you're saying now that the prosecution luckily or whatever mysteriously comes up with some brand new photos later on after the fact, after the guy who's identifying it couldn't identify it, so we find it in some photos but not in other photos, even though that is clearly the spot where it should be, of course, as Dr. Fung did not attest to. So then obviously, the blood wasn't originally there. That coupled with the EDTA, coupled with the environmental degradation, coupled with the high DNA count, all of those things indicate that the blood was obviously planted. And that, of course, with the missing blood from the CC, that, 1.5 cc's of blood missing and them going to the crime scene with that blood, all of those things are indications that the blood was planted. You can get the last word on that blood on those specific spots, and then we can go into the blood on the socket, etc.
At the end of the day, Prosecutor Rock Harmon told Judge Ito that a photo taken on June 13th, the day members of the defense team visited the crime scene, reveals a blood spot on the back gate that did not appear in a July 3rd photo, the one that they showed to
Detective Fung.
Detective Fung, suggesting that the defense may be concealing evidence, an assertion that Schenck denied. So they didn't
show it to Fung.
I'm going to go into week 18, and then we'll see if he did what they did or not. The photograph itself that they showed Fung obviously directly
did not have it,
despite the fact that a different photograph did have it.
That photograph was of the exact same spot. And so the prosecution went to Judge Ito, and then they said, hey, here's photograph that does show that blood sample. And then what became of that?
I don't know what became of that. What I know is that there was a different photograph that showed the blood that you're saying wasn't there in the July 3rd photograph. And that was the one they were hammering Fung with. Now, what it could have been is that they discovered this following Fung's testimony, and that there wasn't an opportunity to re-examine him. This happens in trials, right? Sometimes you get one shot to examine somebody, and then you can, if shit comes up, you can motion or try to get them back, but it's not always successful. There's a number of reasons for this. Some of which has to do with judicial efficiency. Some of it has to do with whether or not Fung was available to be examined again. There could be different reasons, but what this specifically says is that the prosecution found a photo that showed the blood was there on June 13th, And the July 3rd photograph that they were using to hammer Fung didn't show that blood. I think that changes things.
So Fung absolutely was available. The man planted evidence. So the idea that he wouldn't be available to be to testify for the prosecution in this situation for a man that he clearly wanted to be guilty sounds absolutely crazy to me. So it wasn't that he wasn't available. It's just that they never went forward with that. Like I said, they didn't show that to Detective Fung. So now we can move on to the sock. So the sock thing. Regarding the blood, that what you said that he wasn't able to identify in the sock, you're right. And you said it was only microscopic. The problem with that blood on that sock is that that blood was obviously planted as well. And the reason why the defense was so clear that the blood was planted is that the sock wasn't being worn at the time that the blood was that the time that the blood was applied to the sock. So basically, if you take a sock or a glove or anything, or any piece of fabric, like a shirt, and you drop liquid on that shirt, if it's being worn at the time, then the liquid shouldn't seep through to the other side, right? So what happened was the blood went through to the sock to the other side in like a symmetrical spot. So then they were able to say this means that the blood had to have been applied to that sock while it was not being worn, which is how they knew that that blood had to have been planted. It's a mistake that someone might make, right? You think, I'm going to go ahead and plant a little bit of blood on this sock, just a tiny bit. So then that way, we can go ahead and say that, yeah, there was blood on the sock, right? Because it was discovered at O.J. Simpson's house that sock was also planted. And there's camera evidence of that. And that's what the jury was shown. But if we're going to do that, then you need to be intelligent enough to know I can't do it bare. It has to be like something in between it so that it doesn't seep through to the other side. And it did. And they showed that to the jury, which is why we knew that sock was planted. That's my response to that. I know you're reading on it right now, but yeah, and then you can give me your response to that. This is rather unfortunate. As I said before, look, I stand by this, and I think it's being proven right now. Any person that genuinely believes that O.J. Simpson is guilty didn't actually watch the trial. There's no person that does that. Hold on, wait. There's no person that actually watched the trial that came to that conclusion. And it's not just people that watched the trial from the outside. The jurors were exposed to way more than the rest of us regarding that trial. They did a tour through O.J. Simpson's house. They did tours of the crime scene. They were literally there every single hour. I haven't watched every hour of this trial. I've watched probably 1/10 of the trial total, to be honest. I just watched specific interrogation and so on and so forth. The rest I picked up through readings and articles and things like that. So the idea that I wasn't there for the entire thing, but 12 people found this man innocent beyond the reason. They found that there was cause for doubt there. They called the mountain of evidence trash. So it's not just me.
You didn't watch the whole trial?
Common belief thing. I did not watch every minute of the trial. Of course not.
Okay.
I just said that. What you think? I was going to watch literally? I mean, the trial lasted 10 months.
It felt as though by that, like you were implying that like you had some kind of access to credibility because you had watched the whole trial, and that somebody who hasn't watched the whole trial, well, anybody who's watched the full trial is obviously going to think that he's not guilty, but you haven't watched the whole trial either.
Yeah, just to be clear, everyone, the trial had actually lasted about 10 months, I want to say. And it was like day in, day out. They were going, Monday through Friday. The whole trial is available on YouTube I think it's called OJ Trial Uncut. And on that, you have hours and hours. I mean, hundreds of videos, some which last 2 hours, some which last 3 hours, some which last only 50 minutes. But the fact of the matter is there are literal hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours. I'm pretty sure there are thousands of hours. So I didn't watch, again, every minute of the trial. There's a bunch of things where there's going to be dead air in trials, right? So you have like some of the preliminary hearings where there's going to be a bunch of dead air and so on and so forth. But what I did watch, I watched the interrogation of each individual. I watched the cross-examination, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all sorts of things. I just expressed myself. I did not watch the entire trial. You're a lawyer. You understand how much of that information would probably, it's just them going through the legalistic nonsense. But as far as the testimony of the individuals regarding the tapes, regarding the blood, regarding the experts, those things I did watch. I did see the cross-examinations. I saw those things. I saw the prosecution's claims.
Surely then, if you watch the cross-examinations, you watched the cross-examination of Henry Lee, who is the director of the Connecticut State Forensic Science Laboratory, the same Henry Lee that the defense was using to insinuate that the blood soaked through, and it only could have soaked through if no one was wearing it. However, during cross-examination, Lee admitted that the smearing stain does not prove that blood stain was planted. He also admitted that the transfer stain on the socks could also be produced if Simpson touched the socks or during the swab for the phenolphthalein test for blood. I'm sure I mispronounced that. Lee also admitted that item 47 doesn't incriminate Simpson because it belongs to Brown and was found at the crime scene, and admitted the claim that police tampered with or planted it to frame Simpson was, quote, nonsensical.
Okay, so yeah, this is really crazy.
This is the guy he's saying that it's nonsensical to believe that this means that it was planted. This is the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. That's a guy, but then there was obviously testimony to the contrary, and I think it's really insane. So look, here's what we're saying now.
No, this is the guy, Fanatiq. This is the guy that said, like, the blood went through the sock, and the defense is saying, well, that means that someone couldn't have been wearing it. That same guy who testified, that's the expert here. That
you just said that.
Yes, he was saying.
You're repeating yourself. You're repeating yourself. I heard you, and I'm responding. Were you going to say something new, or were you just going to repeat yourself?
Well, because it seemed like you're saying, well, it's just a guy. There was other guys, but this was the guy that just addressed the sock problem that you were talking about.
That's not what I was saying. What I said was the defense also obviously mentioned, or I might have said other people mentioned, which could have easily been the defense. They clearly did mention that the thing had been seeped through, and it did appear to be seeped through. And I'm pretty sure Dr. Lee wasn't the only guy that testified regarding those socks. Again, the jury was shown video specifically. The socks were talked about back to back to back. They were shown video that the socks had been obviously planted. But on top of that, the idea, yes, there was. So again, this is as a person who actually watched the trial. You have no idea.
You have not watched the whole trial.
I didn't say I watched the whole. I didn't say I watched the entire trial.
Then you don't get the context. Look, I read through the whole Wikipedia. I probably know more than you on this, right? I was already correct. I was already correct about the blood samples. That's easy. I was already correct about the blood. Okay,
let me finish. Let me finish.
This dude, Henry Lee was the guy.
Can I finish?
Can I finish? I was talking.
I was talking and you interrupted me. I was absolutely talking and you interrupted me. It's on video. Nice try. If I can finish, what I was going on to say was, yes, as a person who actually watched the trial, it was very clearly indicated that this thing happened. Now, what ended up happening a lot of times in this trial was you had a bunch of people who would testify one way when the defense would get to them, and then afterwards they would be coached by the prosecution on how to change their testimony, and then they would go to the opposite. Here's a perfect example of this. When they asked the original detective about EDTA, and he said, yes, this blood is consistent with EDTA. It's moving consistent with EDTA. Afterwards, they went on recess. During recess, he had a conversation with the prosecution. The reason why we know this is because when he got back on the stand, he completely changed his tone. And then he said, I just want to be clear. I'm not certain that this is EDTA. To which Barry Scheck asked him directly, did you talk to the prosecution while we were on recess during the break? And he said, yes, I did. Then he asked him, during that time, but he said, but I didn't talk about the trial. We don't believe that at all. Then they asked him, so did you decide you wanted to be less of an advocate? And he said, no, I didn't decide that. They said, did your attitude change after the break? And he said, sure, because it was obvious. So originally you testified that the blood is consistent with EDTA. Afterwards, you then go talk to the prosecution and change your tone. Same thing was happening with all of the testimonies. Whenever they would talk to, and this was, by the way, the FBI's witness. This was the prosecution's witness. This wasn't the defense's witness. So these kind of things were happening on I don't remember the person's name. I'm terrible with names. But it was regarding the presence of EDTA.
The sock guy.
This is a different conversation. This is not about the sock. I was talking about the presence of EDTA. This is the guy who testified that there was EDTA and then changed his testimony after talking to the prosecution on break as someone who watched the trial. So what happened with that, you'll see that kind of thing happened on a regular basis. By the way, this was the prosecution's witness. This wasn't the defense's witness. And the prosecution's witness testified that the blood was consistent with EDTA, and then afterwards went out to the break and then came back and said, I'm not sure that it's consistent with EDTA. So what you'll find is those kinds of things. So yes, it was testified originally that yes, the blood had bled. I don't remember his name. I told you I'm terrible with names. It was testified.
The trial, though.
Yeah, but I'm terrible with names. That doesn't mean that I'm going to remember every single name of every individual involved with the trial.
Well, then how can I fact check you then? Who's the guy?
As opposed to having to fact check me in hindsight, if you remember, I very vividly asked you if you would make yourself informed about the case so that we would have information so that I wouldn't have to be arguing with the person who's completely uninformed and getting all of his information from Wikipedia. But you did that anyway.
As opposed to snippets from the trial.
Sure. So now that's where we are. So anyway, as I was going to finish saying, so what you'll find is that witnesses will make statements that are very clear, like, hey, yes, the blood did seep through, and then start making justifications for why it would happen. So what we just heard him say was, Well, yeah, I mean, it could have seeped through if O.J. Simpson touched it. So, like, if he touched the blood and then touched the back of the sock, then those two things, now you'll have a symmetrical spot. Like, that's how it could have happened. Or maybe you start coming up with these theories of for how it could happen. Or that blood was poured on that sock while that sock wasn't being worn, and that's how it got seeped through. Yeah. So, and again, that evidence on that sock was planted. The jury was shown evidence that that sock was planted on video evidence with Furman at the house, standing at an area where the detectives are. The detectives tell him to leave that area. Then they go back and they discover a sock there at the spot that Furman was sitting. That sock had not been discovered prior to Furman standing there, and the jury was shown that, which is why there was obvious to many of them that that sock was planted evidence as well as many other things. And when Furman was put on the stand and they asked him directly, "Did you plant any evidence?" He pled the fifth. Just pointing that out there. So that man was planting evidence, as were other people, which is why they needed to go to the crime scene with the blood, which is why 1.5 cc's was missing, which is why EDTA was present, and which is why they could identify blood stains in some photos and not others.
Okay, so this is raw speculation. I want, I understand that you believe that the cops here were racist and they were planting evidence why O.J. Simpson apparently didn't kill Nicole Brown, but the cops wanted him to. When I'm looking here, Henry Lee was actually a defense witness. So the guy who said that it was nonsensical for the idea that the socks were tampered with, the guy who said on cross-examination that the transfer stain could be that if Simpson touched the socks together, perhaps when he was taking them off, or during the swab, this guy was a defense witness. He was brought by the defense. So it wasn't like he went back to the prosecution and talked with them. Like you insinuated Lee was a prosecution witness. He wasn't. He was a defense witness. This is the guy who is saying, no, the idea that the cops planted this is nonsensical. This is also the guy they brought to talk about the bleed through on the sock. When it comes to the other guy, the guy who apparently changed his testimony as to the EDTA, I'm looking through. I do recall that somebody... from what I recall, there was somebody who did give a testimony, something along those sorts of, well, it's not consistent with EDTA, or it's not consistent with EDTA. I'll have to find the actual dude. But if I recall correctly, the two things that he said weren't technically contradictory. It just sounded like that, right? It sounded wrong and it sounded bad, and the defense attorneys were able to take advantage of that. Regardless, EDTA is found in people in parts per million. You still haven't addressed that.
Sure. Well, because the expert witnesses in the O.J. Simpson trial very clearly stated that it would be found in parts per billion, not per parts per million. And I also want to mention the fact that the same Barry checkmate that statement, and I that went back and forth with another person.
No, which expert said that?
I don't remember those people's names. I remember
it was Frederick Reiters. Frederick Reiters said this.
There we go.
Right.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go. Oh, no, if I can finish. Furthermore, Henry Lee is the same guy who later on got sentenced to prison and who got found liable for fabricating evidence in a murder case. That's who Dr. Henry Lee is. He was a defense witness. Doesn't matter. I'm just pointing out the fact that even if that man wants to come up with justifications for why this thing can happen, the fact of the matter was that the blood did seep through on that sock, and this and Dr. Henry Lee then going and trying to make justifications for it when this man is known for fabricating evidence and things like that. I don't think that speaks to I don't think that speaks to him being completely credible about the ideas of how realistic that the blood was, that it wasn't, that the blood couldn't have been planted. I don't even think that he ever made that statement. I think his whole point of being there was specifically to question the handling of the blood. That was why they brought him in as a witness, because half of the things that they were doing didn't make a whole bunch of sense. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give
address
you.
That?
Of course, I'm going to let you do that. I'm going to let you address that. And here's what I would like to do. As I said before, if you remember, I very vividly asked you, I would like to have a conversation because you're a lawyer, but I wanted you to become informed about the case. And I said I didn't want to talk to you until you became informed about the case. And it feels like, as it is now, that you're not necessarily informed about the case, that you're actually just reading the Wikipedia. So what I will do is, we've discussed several things here. You can go ahead and you can tell me what specific things, just DM it to me. You DM to me which specific things you would like me to get you sources for from this conversation, and we'll revisit it. And I ask you to actually inform yourself about the trial. So then that way we can go ahead and actually have a genuine conversation. So it's not me actually being informed, having watched portions of these testimonies, and then you just getting evidence from Wikipedia pages to try to debunk things that you're not completely informed about.
Okay.
You can get the last word, and then we'll end the conversation.
Okay. So last word. So the prosecution gave Frederick Reiters, who was the forensic toxicologist, who initially said that the EDTA should be in parts per billion as opposed to parts per million. This is the guy that the defense was resting their hat on. The prosecution gave Reiters a fax copy of the EPA article that he referenced during his testimony and had him read it out loud to the jury, demonstrating he misread it. And it does say parts per million of EDTA is normally found in blood. Reiters then claimed it was a typo, but then the prosecution produced a certified copy directly from the EPA confirming the parts per million unit of measurement. This was during the cross-examination. I found that the article that Frederick Reiters himself was referencing. I also found other research indicating that, yes, parts per million can be found in humans. Unlike what Reiters said, it's not that, if it gets to parts per millions, you die. In reality, it can be found in parts per million. It can also be picked up. That can partially be because perhaps preservatives that you eat in food or other kind of exposure that somebody may have can lead you to register EDTA in parts per million. And this was again proven when the investigator himself, or when one of the Agent Martz, tested his own unpreserved blood and found parts per million of EDTA, which disproved Reiters' claim. So during the trial, this guy tested his own unpreserved blood and found that, yes, it was parts per million. Human beings can have blood in concentration of parts per million. I think your insinuation that I'm less informed than you on this, when I knew that, when I've been able to consistently tell you about how many blood samples were taken, about the fact that they were not degraded to the point that they couldn't register as being positive for O.J. Simpson. When I read you specifically 6 different examples of when they did register positive to O.J. Simpson, when you said that the only ones that registered positive for O.J. Simpson were the 3 that were taken later and not the 58 that were taken before, obviously can't be true if I read you 6. I think what you've done is you've watched portions of a trial, and you've watched portions presented by a defense attorneys who admittedly are very good at their job. And part of being good at your job when it comes to an attorney is at trial, because money's on the line, your reputation's on the line, you have a duty to zealously advocate for your client. You are going to misrepresent things. You're going to misrepresent data in order to help out your client. This is what they did, and they did an incredibly good job. So good a job that when you watch the snippets from them, I think that you have also been misled. I would encourage you to actually look at the scientific evidence surrounding this trial, as opposed to just some snippets from a defense lawyer talking about the evidence. And I would also ask that you, despite not watching the entire trial and also not looking at the evidence, that you not say that I'm less informed than you. I think that's incredibly, it's not humble, it's incredibly arrogant, and it's wrong, and the evidence just isn't in your favor. And the fact that you're ending this conversation an hour early, what I think is the reason is because you haven't read this evidence and that you don't want to have this conversation again. And I bet that if I ask you for specifically the claims that are made in this video, you're not going to be able to go and get that information, and you're not going to be able to have this conversation with me again. I bet. And if you prove me wrong, then I'll say that I'm wrong. But specifically, I will send this to you. I want evidence that only the three supposedly high EDTA blood samples were the ones that tested positive for O.J. Simpson. I want you to prove that. I want you to prove that human beings will die if their EDTA reaches parts per million as opposed to parts per billion, and a number of other things I'm sure that we'll get into. But those two in particular, I want you to prove that to me. And when you find evidence of either of those things, then we can have another conversation. Until then, I'm going to keep calling you out on it.
Okay. All right. Make sure you send it to me in text form. Yeah, man. It is really disappointing. I mean, this is like this. You guys have been here, like you know how much I've tried my best to get people to become informed enough to have conversations. It's just sometimes you can't get people to do it. Or we could have had the conversation a week ago if all he was going to do is read the Wikipedia. It's not a very, very long.
As
Wikipedia.
Opposed to snippets of the trial.
It's not. You don't know what I've watched, but as opposed
to... You said
to
snippets of the trial. You said I would have the last word. What are you doing?
I didn't. No, we're done. The conversation's over. I'm just talking to my stream now.
Oh, gotcha.
What do you think?
Sure.
Yeah. That your outro will be the last thing that's in the video. Yeah, I feel like, as you guys know, I've been saying it for a long time, and that was my original contention. I don't believe that there's any person who actually watched the trial, who is actually informed about the trial, that genuinely believes O.J. Simpson is guilty. I don't think that to be the case. Let me take that back. You got obviously Marsha Clark, and I don't even think she genuinely believes it. You got Christopher Darden. I don't think he genuinely believes it. I think a lot of people get motivated reasoning and they're biased, and their prosecutors, it's their job to know it. But it's really crazy because everyone is always uninformed and opinionated. And almost every point that I brought up here had to be contested by Wikipedia pages or Googling on the spot because there's no actual information. And it is really disappointing. This is the same thing that happened on my panel, where it was hey, I'm asking y'all to get informed about the thing. And then they're just give the milk toast taste and it's take, and it's just yeah, what are we gonna do here, man? We can't actually have a conversation. It's always one-sided. It feels unfair.
Okay, hold on. Do you want me to memorize all the direct quotes for you next time so I don't have to read it off Wikipedia?
I want you to actually know what you're talking about and not be Googling things on the spot because of the fact that you've never even actually had contentions with these ideas before.
I promise you, I know more about this than you do. And until you find me those 2 points I asked for, I know more than you do.
Okay, you can claim that if you want to. And if I find those 2 points that you asked for, then you'll admit that you never knew more than I did?
If you find me those 2 points, I will admit that you're right about those 2 points, and then I'll take back what I said now.
You'll admit that I knew more than you about the trial?
I don't know if in total you would know more than me about the trial, but I will say that you're right about those 2 points, but you're not going to find them, right? Because I was able to find that information on the internet. Because believe it or not, simply the fact that you find information on the internet as opposed to snippets from YouTube doesn't mean that information's wrong. In fact, it's sourced and it's usually better information than hand-selected snippets from you. Do you not see how bias can interfere with that? Do you not see how when you're literally quoting a defense attorney as opposed to experts on things that are expert matter, how that can come across as disingenuous?
Of course, I can understand that. Do you think that it's realistic to be able to say that some of the people that are found in the media who would be making editorials about this thing would be particularly biased as well? Or do you feel like they're as objective as they can be?
So the 2 things that I mentioned, right? The blood.
Are you going to answer my question?
Sure, editorials absolutely can be biased. I don't disagree with you. But a lot of the editorials are based off of scientific information. There was 61 blood samples, and there was a lot more than just the 3 that you said that tested positive for O.J. Simpson's blood, and EDTA can be found in humans at parts per million.
Okay. So there's bias in the things that you read, and you're saying that there's bias in the things that I watch, which is just the actual trial?
No, I'm saying I'm citing the actual scientific evidence, not the editorials, not the opinions that are located within the editorials, not, oh, obviously he did it because of this. I'm not citing that, obviously he did it. Well, obviously he did it, right? What you're doing is you're citing the defense attorney who's going to be saying, obviously he didn't do it, as if he's some kind of expert on the actual science, as opposed to obvious facts within the trial, such as the fact that other blood, other than those 3 samples that you're referring to, there was other blood that tested positive for OJ. I listed 6.
I agree there was other blood.
You said it was inconclusive.
For OJ.
No, roll back the tape. That's not what you said.
Okay, so let me just make sure that we're crystal clear. I 100% agree that the blood on the sock tested positive for OJ. That blood was planted. I 100% agree that the blood that was found in the Bronco tested positive for OJ. That blood was planted. I 100% agree that the blood found on the glove was tested positive for OJ. That blood was planted. Obviously, if we're looking at all the different blood that's all around, I know that there's a bunch of blood that tested positive for OJ. But what I'm talking about specifically was the blood at the scene of the murder on that gate tested not conclusive, and they weren't able to get information from those blood samples, which is why they needed to go back to the trial in order to find these new blood samples that could actually be tested positive to OJ. But I don't want to. I'm not relitigating this with you.
Why was the Bronco blood planted? What evidence do you have of that?
I'm not. I don't want to. We're done with the conversation.
No, you
so I don't know why
you
we're still
watched
arguing.
it. Just bring me a point that I can research. Okay, what evidence?
Okay,
if
sure.
any,
I'll tell you
that
why.
the Bronco
I'll tell you
blood was
why.
planted. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll give you this, and then we can be done. So the reason why I believe that the blood in the Bronco was planted was for all of the previously stated reasons about the EDTA, about the idea that that the blood was missing from his thing, that they went to the crime scene with it. And here's the other crazy thing about it: so that blood in that Bronco wasn't originally identified when the police it was originally told there was no blood stains, there was no anything, and the Bronco was kept literally in a locked thing that police and other people didn't have access to. Then later on, they ended up moving the Bronco out of that secured location, and then upon that point is when the blood was planted, and then they discovered that blood there. It wasn't there originally. The jury is well aware of this. This is why they found this person empty. You can listen to the testimony of all the different jurors. You asked me a question, and I'm answering your question, but I don't want to back
You're
and
just
forth, 'cause we ended
lying.
the
You're just
conversation.
flat out lying. I'm reading right here.
Okay.
A total of 11
Okay,
DNA samples were collected from the Bronco,
I'm gonna have
8
to
of
mute
which
you,
were on
'cause
June
I'm sorry,
13th.
I had to mute you, and it's not. I didn't want
You're
to,
lying.
but it's just I have to because
liar.
again I told you.
You are lying. You are lying, sir.
Hey, buddy,
You
I
are
can't
lying.
hear you. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Well, I'm
I
sure.
got you. Got it.
I'm lighting up on my screen.
You got to
I'm
wait.
lighting up on my screen.
So you're still talking. I don't feel like you're. This
Well,
is the thing.
I'm lighting up. Did you mute me on your end?
Buddy, you're muted. I can't hear what you're saying, and I'm not a lip reader.
There is no
I'm not
red
a lip reader, but you're still
microphone
trying
next
to
to
talk
my
to
name.
me, and this isn't a conversation because I told you already.
Well, I'm talking to my audience then, motherfucker. You a fucking liar.
Talking.
It's June 13th, right here. A total of 11 DNA samples
I don't think
collected
you know how
from the
mute
Bronco.
works. Are you really this unaware?
Eight. Hold on. So for my own audience, because he's a coward.
You're going to keep talking to yourself.
A total of 11 DNA samples were collected from the Bronco.
Okay, so that was the end of the conversation. Hey,
8 were collected by the LAPD
we'll have a conversation
crime
at a later
lab
date.
on June 13th.
I'm going to go ahead and exit here.
June 13th.
And then we'll go ahead and have a conversation at a later date if you can actually become informed about the trial like I was talking to.
3 were collected by the State Department crime lab on July 29th. So 8 of the blood samples were collected on June 13th, right? He's saying that, well, no, like they had to come back later. It initially was empty. This is not true. 8 of the samples were collected on June 13th, and 3 were collected by the State Department crime lab on July 29th. Both collections returned matches to Simpson, Brown, and Goldman, okay? This is important. Both of the times, on July 29th and on June 13th. What Fanatiq just said, which is that only the blood in there was obviously planted, and that DNA came back only after they took Simpson's blood. They took Simpson's blood after June 13th, but the blood collected on June 13th from the Bronco tested positive for Simpson, Brown, and Goldman. Yeah, just for you guys. I don't know what I was expecting. It's Fanatiq. He's a racial demagogue. Yeah. And what he'll do is like you'll get him on something, and then he'll like quickly restate it and like try to like leave out the part like the objection that you put forward, as if like he's right. Like, oh, so what you're saying is this thing that I'm right about. Well, no, because of this other thing that I just said that you're not repeating. It is frustrating. Like, you know, people claim to care about experts. I am an attorney at law, and I did read through like a significant amount of evidence for this. And this guy watched a couple snippets from the trial and is pulling shit that is just completely false. He obviously didn't watch the cross-examination of Fielders. I think his name was Fielders. He obviously didn't watch the cross-examination that demonstrated that the preservative can be found in parts per million. It's not found in parts per... It can be also be found in parts per billion, by the way. But it can be found in parts per million in humans, and it doesn't kill them. The agent himself drew blood, and it tested parts per million. So I'm going to send him my questions, specifically the EDTA questions and the. I really do remember this. He said, no. The other blood tested inconclusive. It was the 3 blood tests that they came back for. That was the one that tested positive for DNA for O.J. Simpson. It's just not the case. So I'm going to send him. I'm going to request evidence on that. I'm going to request evidence on the EDTA. I'm going to request evidence on what he just said about the Ford Bronco. That's not true. This conversation, by the way, was supposed to go till 11. I just want to point that out. And he cut it early. I didn't cut it early. I made time. He requested to have the conversation, first of all. He requested to have the conversation because he wanted to talk to a lawyer about the O.J. Simpson trial. And he requested that it be start at 9 so we could have 2 hours, because I initially brought it up, well, we can start at 10 and then we can have 1 hour. He said, no, like 9, 2 hours. Fine, no problem. Right? I can talk to you as long as you want about this. And then he cuts it early because I read the Wikipedia. Believe it or not, guys, Wikipedia is not that bad. As long as you obviously ignore some of like editorializing that might be located within, right? So the Wikipedia had some statements like conclusively disproven. I avoided those words, for example, because that's not really what you're supposed to draw from evidence. Like conclusions about like, well, obviously this is like his testimony is false. What you do is you just simply point to the fact like, look, you're saying EDTA cannot be found in parts per million in human beings. Here are two studies that show that you're wrong. And in fact, the guy himself was cross-examined and shows that EDTA can be found in parts per million. And then there are 61 blood samples, not 3, that were brought to trial, and those blood samples showed that OJ positives for OJ Simpson, Nicole Brown, and Goldman. The other thing is we didn't even really, and he said we're going to get into it later. Of course, we didn't because he cut the conversation early. The other thing that we didn't even get into is the clothing fibers. So all at the crime scene, Nicole Brown's body and Goldman's body, there were blue fibers from a blue cotton shirt that were found, and no audios. Can you hear me? Even if you muted me in Discord, you still should be able to hear me because it goes through. No audio is my statement. I don't mind calling people out as audio suspicions or wondering if. Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Okay, he did kick me out now. Nice. Hold on 1 second. All right. That was a little petty of him. So we didn't get into the cloth fibers because O.J. Simpson was seen earlier that day wearing a blue cotton shirt, which matched the fibers that were found at the scene, and that he changed his shirt before he got into the limo and left. So there was that. There was the footprints of where I think like the particular footprint that was found was only for a certain type of shoe. That was there was like 255, I think, pairs of shoes that existed like that in America, and there was one particular shoe seller who sold it that O.J. Simpson would frequent, but they couldn't conclusively prove that he owned that specific pair of shoes because he could have thrown them away. So I mean it's like assault. It's not nearly as good as the blood evidence, but it's evidence regardless. What else do I have down? I made an entire Obsidian vault about this topic. Criminologist Renee Montgomery reported the results from D1S80 DNA matching, narrating her results using a poster board to reconstruct the prosecution's theory of how the crimes were committed. Her results showed that Simpson was present during the murders, as evidenced by his blood being found next to the bloody footprints next to the bodies. Her results show that he fled the scene through the back gate, as evidenced by his blood found on a trail of blood drops leading away from the victims and towards and on the back gate. Her results then show that he got into his Bronco and drove home, as evidenced by the victim's blood found on the door outside and inside on the console of the Bronco. Her results then show he entered his home through the backyard, as evidenced by the trail of bloodstains with his and the 2 victims found leading behind his home, and the bloody glove found behind his home that had blood from all 3. Her results suggest he changed his clothes prior to meeting the limousine driver, as evidenced by his sock. he left in his bedroom having Nicole Brown Simpson's blood on it. It was that sock that he brought up Lee, the defense witness, because of the blood spatter that was found on both sides of the sock. And it was Lee himself who then went on in cross-examination to testify that that could have happened due to pinching of the sock when he was taking it off, right? You pinch the blood on one side to the other side, it can bleed through. When you're swabbing the blood, it could get on the other side potentially. When you're handling the sock, it could get on the other side potentially. And that defense witness himself specified that any idea that it was tampered with is absurd. And it's interesting how after I bring that up, right, after I bring up how the defense witness in his cross-examination admitted multiple things that were negative for the defense, how then it becomes relevant that he had apparently been found liable for falsifying evidence at some later point in time. So literally the defense calls this guy and expecting him to give some kind of testimony, and then he gives testimony that the defense actually doesn't like, and now Fanatiq's saying, well, he's a criminal. How can we trust what he has to say? Well, if he was a criminal that we couldn't really trust how to say what he said, then why did the defense call him? Why did the defense call him, and why are you, resting on his testimony about the blood spatter on the blood being on both sides of the sock if he's just some criminal, if you can't trust him? Clearly motivated reasoning. This is clearly what's going on. Yeah, I'm going to see what he's saying. Hold on a second. Maybe he's watching me too. That'll be fun. No, he's again on YouTube looking at specific clips from the trial. He's on YouTube looking at specific clips of the trial. He's not watching the whole trial. He's on YouTube looking at clips on the trial. Because this is how you learn things, gentlemen and ladies. You go to YouTube and you look up specific clips and then you watch them. And that's how you find out truth. You don't read Wikipedia, because unlike YouTube, that is not a good source. And all the sources that Wikipedia article links to, that's not good sources either. Oh, and the trial testimony transcripts, that's not good sources. YouTube clips, those are good sources. Yeah, disgusting. It was motivated reasoning the whole time. He is supporting O.J. Simpson because O.J. Simpson's black. He is saying that O.J. Simpson was framed by the police, despite there being no evidence of that, because he is a conspiracy theorist. And that's the reason why. And unfortunately, back at that time, he wasn't alone. There was a lot of people who were also confused as to DNA evidence. A big part, by the way, of the shifting beliefs of the fact that he did it is actually informed by the increasing trust in DNA evidence. So this is something that you guys might not know, but DNA evidence was actually relatively new at the time of the OJ trial. And I know this because I read the Wikipedia. And if you go read the Wikipedia like I did, right, you can find sources that show how new it was. And because it was new, it wasn't unreliable, right, because they had triple checked them, right, and every single one came back positive. It wasn't unreliable necessarily, but a lot of lay people didn't really know how it worked. And so because a lot of the lay people didn't know really, like, they didn't see it as ironclad as people see DNA evidence now, right? Like if this trial happened today, I think you could even keep the demographics the exact same of the jury, and you would see, I think you could potentially see a different verdict, right? I think that, the moment they're like, okay, we have 61 pieces of blood evidence, and they conclusively show that there was OJ's blood at the crime scene all over the place in multiple locations, taken at multiple different dates. Oh, and there is Nicole Brown and Goldman's blood that was at OJ's, on OJ's Bronco, in the Bronco and on outside on the handle. That was on his lawn and was on one glove that was found at his place and another glove that was found at the crime scene. I don't see a jury acquitting that. I don't see it. I now, like, with all that DNA there, I just don't see it. And another thing that has to be said is trust in the police was a little bit different back in those days. Obviously, this was shortly after Rodney King. We already have one juror who said that the reason she voted the way that she did was revenge for Rodney King, revenge against the white, I guess the white woman here, but I guess the white man too. I'm pretty sure Goldman was white. And there were, I think the jury was made up of eight black jurors, two Hispanic jurors, one Native American. I think it was a mixed race person, Native American and white, and the one juror was white, and a lot of the black jurors there, from testimony that was said by some of the officers following the trial, was that there was talk about potentially motivated reasoning, and the one juror now is openly saying it. Like, yeah, how many blood samples will they find in your house? You think one, maybe two, and maybe you have 100. Sorry, I'm inventing facts. 61 drops of blood. 61. There was 61 blood samples. That you can find this on the Wikipedia. 61 blood samples. Fanatiq said that the old ones were inconclusive, and in fact, the new blood samples were the correct ones. That's not true. If 58 of the blood samples were inconclusive, they wouldn't have admitted them at trial. The prosecution wouldn't have. The defense could try to bring them potentially, but I don't even know why the defense necessarily would actually, because if they were inconclusive for O.J. Simpson's DNA, the defense doesn't necessarily have to prove that somebody else did it. I don't see why they would necessarily bring that in actually. The prosecution brought in the blood evidence because it tested positive for O.J. Simpson's DNA, and this is all in the Wikipedia. And obviously, yeah, during the bad faith debate from Fanatiq, I was referencing specific parts of the Wikipedia because I don't, believe it or not, I don't have a photographic memory. I'm pretty sure that's been made absolutely clear by this conversation. I'll often say things like, oh, whoever it was, let me find this specific person. And then I'm scrolling through, what specifically did he say? What was the specific quote? And then I'll give the specific quote. I assure you, I remember more about the specific or know more about the specific quotes and the specific people that were involved than if I had simply watched snippets of the testimony. But I guess at this stage, here's a real question for you guys, and you guys can let me know what you think. Part of me wants to spend the next several months of my life watching every second of the fucking trial, just so I can go to Fanatiq and say, hey, I watched all the trial. And hey, it comparts with the Wikipedia that I read. And I heard that cross-examination you were talking about. And that's what it says. But what I think is that if that happens, I'm going to do that, and Fanatiq is either going to refuse to have a conversation with me again, or he's going to say that, well, that's not actually important. That's not actually important. That's you don't remember all of it. You were telling me sitting right here, you remember all of it? No, I don't remember every single bit of it. It's a multi-month trial. I didn't watch all of it. Well, then how can you say that this is wrong? I could see that happening. So I think what I'm going to do is on Twitter, I'm going to do it on Twitter because that's the only way to get any kind of response, I think, to this. On Twitter, I'm going to tag him. If he doesn't block me, we'll see if he blocks me. I'm going to tag him with the questions, the two questions that I asked, because I know that I'm right on these, right? The first question of, can you prove to me that human beings can't tolerate EDTA on parts per million as opposed to parts per billion? And can you prove to me that the blood samples collected on June 13th were inconclusive and only the later blood samples were conclusive for Simpson's DNA? And he will not be able to find either of those, because you could already tell at the end he was kind of weaseling backwards a little bit. Well, there was other. I'm not saying those were the only ones that were tested positive. No, evidence gathered from June 13th did test positive, flat out. It did. So if you're saying that evidence tested positive on the day of collection, which was before they took the blood sample of O.J. Simpson, then how did the blood get there? How did Nicole Brown's blood get there on June 13th? How did O.J. Simpson's blood get on the crime scene on June 13th? How did that happen? Can somebody explain to me? How did that happen? I think we know the answer of how that happened. So I'll ask those two questions, and we will see what the answer is. And we'll see if he blocks me. If he blocks me, I'm going to make a Twitter post about that too, because it'll be funny. All right. Well, now that we've kind of decompressed, what do you guys think? I'm going to do the poll again, actually. I did the poll at the beginning of the conversation. I'm going to do the poll again. I'm going to set this one to 3 minutes because you guys are more active now, obviously, than the beginning. All right, start a new poll. We'll see. We'll see how effective of a rhetorician I've been in combating misinformation, dangerous misinformation. Wait a minute, Parallax, did you watch the entire trial? I'm totally in Fanatiq's chat right now. Did you watch the entire trial, Parallax? I want to know. Did he leave my chat? I swear to yes, I'm 36, bro. Okay, all right, good. You watched the entire trial from beginning to end. Is that right, Parallax? Just I really want to confirm this. I voted no. He's an angel. Fartmatic convinced me with an overwhelming mishandling, misrepresenting. Okay. All right, Parallax. Every bit, motherfucker is so goddamn guilty. Do you have a second to jump on Discord? Do you want to chat about it? As somebody who's watched the entire trial, because if I'm not mistaken, Fanatiq said somebody who's watched the entire trial could not find, or only the people who would find him guilty have not watched the entire trial. That's what he said. Only the people that would think he's not guilty have, yeah, or would think he's guilty have not watched the trial. So that would include you, kind of, because you've watched the entire trial, but it would not include you because you think he's guilty. If you can't jump on, that's fine. There's no problem. You fucking trolls. I say, yeah, I do the fucking poll now, and all of you are in my chat backing me up, and then the poll comes out that it's not as good as before. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Give me a few. I can probably hop in. Just let me know. So what were the, help me out, guys. What were the questions again, specifically? Okay, so now we got a split vote between no, he's an angel, and yes, beyond reasonable doubt. Got it. Thanks. He's an angel for taking out that devil woman. Crazy. Crazy. Absolutely. I want to look at an exact date for when his blood was drawn. I remember something about parts per billion of EBD cards and blood. Jesus Christ, bro. What was the? I know June 13th was before it. When was the exact date that O.J. Simpson had his blood drawn? What was the exact date? Come on, guys. You guys must have read the Wikipedia too. Surely you know. He June 13th at approximately 3:30. So later that day is when he took it. So this would have been. And they were quick with the blood draw. It's crazy. I really wish they would have waited till the next day. Because then I could have been like, it was a whole day afterwards. But no, it was just later that day before they took the evidence from, or sorry, after they took the evidence from the crime scene. At trial, Paratus documentation confirmed the blood draw took place at 3:30. The jail security camera showed that Venator left the jail at approximately 4, and he did drive for over an hour to get to Rockingham. The logbook at the crime scene showed that he arrived at 5:20, and he transferred custody of Simpson's blood at 5:30 p.m., and the envelope was still sealed. The blood of both Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown taken at autopsy was booked immediately into evidence by Detective Venator. Detective Mark Furman never had custody of any of the reference blood. Nice. Nice. They typically do immediately at jail. Yes, they did. Okay, the prosecution 61, the volume of DNA evidence was unique. The prosecution believed they could reconstruct it. What else was there? Surely there was more. Did we really get caught up on just those two things the whole time? Was there really more? No, was there really not more? There definitely was more. We definitely had a full conversation. Oh, well, I'm out of characters anyway. All right, made a Twitter post about it. Please show me evidence that human beings will die if they have blood measurements of EDTA in parts per million. 2, please show me evidence that all the blood samples collected on June 13th, the earlier collection that were presented at trial, were, quote, inconclusive. Yes. All right. Would be cool to see debates on Twitch like the Soho Forum does, where we can see how much of the audience changes their mind. Well, you fuckers, I had a poll before this where 5 of you said he was guilty of sin. And then I did another poll, and 2 of you were like, actually, he's an angel. 1 of you because he killed that devil woman. So technically, according to my own poll, if we're measuring this off of polls, Fanatiq won. At least that poll. That's the only poll I have access to right now. So you fuckers lost me the debate. You fucker. Oh my god. See, most of the time I like you guys, but then you guys pull this shit. It's like, Jesus Christ. It's so dumb. Somebody come talk to me. I got time to fill. I was expecting this to go until fucking 11 p.m. Maybe even later. But we ended it early. Or sorry, Fanatiq ended it early. I was willing to keep going. But am I pissed? Yes, I am pissed. I didn't know what I was expecting. I was really hoping for, some admissions of, oh, did you know that EDTA can be found in parts per million in human beings and not parts per billion? I was really hoping for him to say, oh shit, I didn't know that. I must have missed that part of the cross-examination. I must have missed those studies. I must have missed this shit. I'm going to post some shit in under my tweet. I'm going to reply to it with the 2 studies that I was able to find. One is a study that was cited by the fucking dude. I'm also going to post the trial testimony. Why can't I copy? Oh, copy URL. There it is. My bad. Thus, DNA remains amplifiable in bloodstains for many months, even at extreme RH and temperatures up to 45 degrees Celsius. Even in human climates, the average RH is usually not more than 80%, and RH rarely exceeds 93%. Therefore, we conclude that normal climatic conditions are not critical for the long-term survival of DNA in untreated bloodstains. Wild. All right, I posted, which should have been, why can't I look at this whole thing? I feel like such a fucking boomer. All right, I posted it. Oh, wait. It's just the big thing. That's dumb. Okay. So here's what I did for those of you who like my random mutterings. I made a Twitter post. Mr. Fanatiq, please show me evidence that human beings will die if they have blood measurements of EDTA in parts per million. 2, please show me evidence that all blood samples collected on June 13th, the earlier collection that were presented at trial, were, quote, inconclusive. And then I have linked the 2 articles showing that human beings can have EDTA in parts per million, as opposed to dying at parts per million. I linked the trial transcript, and I also linked a study showing how long DNA lasts in blood stains. He was indicating that after 3 weeks the DNA in the blood is going to be deteriorated. However, it's just not true. 3 weeks is not long enough for the DNA in blood to be degraded to the point of being unusable. It's just not true. So that study was posted as well. But the most critical element, and I really tried to emphasize this, was one of the agents. I said this like probably 4 times. I don't know if it was actually heard. Agent Martz, you guys can look this up. Agent Martz tested his own unpreserved blood and found parts per millions of EDTA, disproving Reiter's claim. Then Dr. Reiters admitted that the EDTA results from Martz's unpreserved blood were similar in evidenced blood drops in question, and not even close to levels from Martz's preserved blood from a purple top tube, which had more than 100 times more EDTA than the evidence samples. Crazy. You have to update our Twitter on your About section. What is it? What do you mean? I should have said all humans will die. Please show me evidence that all humans will die if they have blood measurements of EDTA in parts per million. Because he could weasel, he could say, well, I found one human being that died. They had parts per million. And that clearly, no. Like, it's got to be, the claim was that you can't have EDTA in parts per million, otherwise you'll die. That was obviously the claim. I'm preserving that for the record. We all know it. And so if he tries to pull that, I would be fucking blown away. All right, let's find out what you're talking about. You're saying I got to update something? Official Twitter of the Anti-Communism United stream. Yes, I am Lactoid, twitch.tv/lactoidtv. So this is a question for you, Rothbardy. I've changed my name to Lactoid TV in order to be more discoverable. Honestly, that's the only reason I did it. And I still like the concept of, a united anti-communism front, which is why my Discord server is still called Anti-Communism United. And I still want to call it like the Anti-Communism United stream, kind of similar to like how Prime, like it's the Reverie. It's that's not what you look up on Twitch, but that's how you find him. So it's Lactoid TV. I host the Anti-Communism United stream, and we fight all the communists. Not all of them. The ones that are useful, we keep around. You have a Discord. I do have a Discord, Anti-Communism United. Would you like a invite link? I can probably get an invite link right here in the Twitch chat. Yeah. Ooh. Copy. Oh. There you go. Your Twitter link here on Twitch takes me to Anti-Com United, which doesn't exist. Oh, I see what you're saying. On Twitch, when you click on Twitter, it takes you to... Aha. All right, I hear you. I will fix that. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm a boomer and not the best with optimizing stream quality. I've done everything on this stream in terms of like the layout myself. So hopefully it's pretty good. I worked at it a little bit. Hopefully it's high enough quality for general watching. I like the blue space background, the stars and nebulae. That's the plural of nebula, right? Do you guys know that the plural of octopus is not octopi, it's octopodes, because the root word of octopus is Greek. So, according to Greek linguistic rules, if you want to refer to a group of octopus, if you want to refer to octopus in multiples of them, you would call them octopodes. That's the correct pronunciation if you want to follow the rules of grammar. So I always call them octopodes, and I try to find every conceivable way to insert that fact into every conversation I have. Mhm. The plural of octopus is squid. They are both mollusks, but squid and octopodes have very different evolutionary pathways. I think the common ancestor of an octopus and a human being is like a flatworm or something. So like it goes way back, like way back. There was like a split in the evolutionary chain, and like flatworms are where we come together. So an octopus really has an entirely different evolutionary pathway than humans do. An entirely different evolutionary history, not entirely, but you know what I'm saying, like a mostly different evolutionary history than human beings do. And so they were able to separately evolve intelligence, which is super interesting when you think about it. Because if they were able to separately evolve intelligence, then we have two examples, at the least, I'm sure there's more. We have two examples of intelligence evolving from non intelligence, because flatworms don't really have any kind of nervous system. So we have examples of that. Isn't that crazy? So we have at least two examples. Well, could there be three? Could there be four? Kind of makes the whole, intelligent alien life thing a little bit more plausible, doesn't it? I don't know. I think so. I like anti-communist. It sounds like I can bring some clicks and random discussion when someone reads it, but IDK. Fair? Maybe I'll try to make it more clear. I'll work on it. But I do need to fix the Twitter on my. Does the YouTube link work? Yeah, the YouTube link works. Don't address my chat, beer fart snark. If I'm serious, I will tag you. First of all, thank you for the bits. Second of all, I gotta comment on everything in chat, dude. I gotta be active with you guys. You guys are making good points and good arguments, and bad votes though on the second poll. Bad votes, but otherwise good discussion. So I wanna bounce off of it and address it and talk about it. But Lactoid, the glove did not fit. You must have quit. We didn't even get into that. The glove, there's like so many possibilities of what could have happened. The blood could have shrank due to absorption of blood, because that happens. He also had plastic gloves on underneath the gloves. That could have added more mass underneath, making it harder to get the glove on. He could have been acting. That's probably the most obvious one. He could be pretending to have a hard time getting his hand in the glove. Oh my God, it's so hard to get my hand in the glove. I could probably do that with any piece of clothing. I don't have a glove on me. No, I don't have a glove on me. So that sucks. Can't use that example. But imagine I had a glove. I could put it on very easily, and then I could I can't put it on. I could do that pretty easily too. The fact that that was convincing, I think, demonstrated the inadequacy of that jury. Sorry. One of the things we learn in law school is that juries are pretty dumb by and large. And I'm sorry, it's just true. I think the average reading level for a jury is at a fourth grade level. That's what we're taught. We're taught to frame everything as though a fourth grader could understand it. And the attention span of a juror is it's either 7 minutes or 14 minutes. It's one of the multiples. I forget. But you got to keep all your arguments within that time frame whenever you're arguing in front of a jury, because if you go on too long, they'll lose focus. So if you start getting past that 7 or 14 mark, you make loud noises, right? To refocus them or to keep them awake. You make quick movements. You have to do some kind of theatrics just to wake them up a little bit, because they either fall asleep, sometimes explicitly. I think Prime has admitted to falling asleep as while being a juror before, or they'll sort of zone out, and then they're not going to hear what you're saying. And this can include during cross-examination, right, where they're not going to hear what you're saying about things that explicitly disprove things that they'd been saying beforehand, which is what happened. I'm pretty sure. I would expect multiple times during that trial, because I was looking through a lot on the Wikipedia, at least. I was looking through a lot of like, okay, here were the claims, cross-examination. Oh, on cross-examination, it was all bullshit. I think the summary was like there was only one claim that could not deductively be proven to be false from the defense, and that was that the glove could have been planted. You cannot definitively disprove that. Everything else was complete bullshit in terms of like the theory of the claim. Now, yeah, that was the summary. So pretty crazy. Only evidence that agrees with him is true. Everything else is a mistake or conspiracy. I'm going back, by the way, so some of these might seem a little bit old. This is the hallmark of a conspiracy theorist. You cherry pick data that agrees with you, and you ignore data that doesn't agree with you because you are trying to advocate for a specific theory. You're not trying to disprove your theory. And so the specific theory that you're trying to advocate for is that white people did it, that the whole thing was white supremacy, that it was cops that had planted evidence on O.J. Simpson. It was cops that did that. Can you guys believe like that was the actual theory? Like they couldn't like explicitly say it. They did explicitly say it, but like I remember there was like when I was reading through it, there was times in which Judge Ido was like specifically saying like, no, stop, you can't say that. When the defense would like try to say like, oh, they planted evidence in the Bronco. No, stop, you haven't presented like anything that proves that. There's no evidence, by the way, that there was anything planted in the Bronco. Zero. There, like, not even speculation you can think of. Just because the evidence was collected on June 13th. So how could the blood be there on June 13th, planted on the Bronco? It just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense at all. It's impossible. When did he ask you to debate this? Did he expect you to memorize all 10 months of trial footage in that time? We agreed to discuss this 2 weeks ago, roughly. He reached out to me and said, hey, you want to talk about the trial? Which I was like, sure, no problem. He asked me for a discussion, and he asked me to not disagree, just to disagree, which is ironic. But that's what, yeah, it was a very brief conversation. It was polite. I don't think he did anything wrong in the discussion. And we set this up, and I reached out to him, asked for what time. We decided we're kind of going back and forth. I said, you know, midnight's a bit late. If we can, and then he said, what about 10? I said, yeah, if it's only going to go for like an hour, sure, an hour or so, sure. And then he said, well, how about we make it 9 for 2 hours? No problem. I would do that. So yeah, I did reading in the meantime. I had other debates to prepare for. I'm not going to lie. I did other work too. And I also work a full-time job from 8 o'clock in the morning, usually until about 6 o'clock at p.m. I sometimes leave a little bit earlier to make room for, Wick. He has his debates a little bit earlier, but he always lets me know in advance so I can plan around that. So I've had people come to me and say like, hey, can you do a debate at 5, like day of? I just can't do it, right, because of my job. So yeah. No Cal Mike, if me and Likes would ever agree on something, 100% it's correct. True. No Cal Mike, conclusion, he did it. True. My guess is if there's blood on the fence that was conclusively OJ, then it would have also been planted. Could the blood that was sitting in the elements have a higher likelihood of being contaminated? I don't quite get that question, but sure. Don't forget, lawyers cannot misrepresent information. Ha! Nor can be biased towards their client. Only the thing that agree with me are valid. I like that. It's really disappointing that you didn't watch the clips I watched and didn't come to the conclusion that I did. True. I should have done that. It's fucked. If I did that, maybe I would have won the fucking poll that I put in chat that you goobers told me. You fucking goobers. You voted against me. You voted against me in the second vote. Why'd you do that? I'm not going to do a third vote because that sounds like a fucking recount, but I really won't. Alternative, he grabbed a glove that wasn't his and used it to kill her, and it was tight when they tried to fit it on him because it was always tight. True. Yeah, that could be true as well. It could have been a bad fitting glove to begin with, and that he simply used that. Crazy. He could have faked the difficulty. Plastic gloves could have created more friction. He could have had swollen hands. The list goes on. Absolutely. Magnum XL stonks line go up. I got no fucking clue what you're getting at there. Sure. See, using condoms is like eating a candy bar with the wrapper still on. Why would you do it? I'm kidding. Use protection, folks. Don't don't do it. My ex-wife's divorce lawyer is a prostitute. He fucked me and then charged me for it. True. Stop the count. Yeah, I'm not gonna redo it. I'm pissy about it. I was pissy about it, the poll, but I'm not gonna redo it. I'll take that L. Of all the W's tonight, I deserve that L at the very least, right? Of all the W's. And yes, I think this was a W. I think consistently on the shit that he took for granted, it was not for granted. OJ slamming 30 grams of water. You got trolled. No, I didn't get trolled. And the reason why I know I didn't get trolled is because Fanatiq released a video on this beforehand, and I watched that video. Sorry. He released a video in which he made all these bullshit claims down to a T. I have the link. I have the link to the video. You can all go and watch the video. And the claims made in the video are the same claims he made in today's debate. He has consistently held this position. I mean by the voters. Oh. My bad. Not sure who's more soft, Fanatiq or his mods. They asked me if I came from you. Of course you did. You were here first, Parallax. You mentioned his name, but I've been there all of 20 seconds, 30 seconds. I didn't watch the debate. They're mad. Did you get banned? Did you get banned from their chat? No way. Did you get banned from the chat? Let me check. Oh, that's boring. Oh, you're talking about League of Legends in here. Dude, Dude, everyone knows Twitch isn't for video games. What the fuck? Hmm. Oh, Parallax. What are we gonna do with you? You need a partner in crime and do a weekly reaction debunking stream of some video or topic. We could probably just watch the fucking Fanatiq video and debunk it now if you want to. It's only 27 minutes long. Good. Yeah. Okay, I have, yeah, okay. Bro, my history is just full of fucking links to all sorts of shit. And then the wire. If he takes the video down, I swear to God. No, it's not the right thing. we go. Oh, shit. Sorry, 1 second. All right. Are we ready, folks? We're going to review a video. Let's do it.
Case. They didn't like properly insulate the crime scene. They
Yeah,
had
we're skipping
OJ
this.
has been obviously like a pop figure that was in hindsight. I had a friend that really wanted me to watch something about the OJ Simpson trial that had Cuba Gooding Jr. in it, and I didn't want to watch it. I told him, no, like, it's just going to make me very upset. My mother had gone and read the Johnny Cochran book, and in it he really kind of explains exactly why. He's 100% convinced that there was no evidence to say that OJ Simpson did it and that OJ was innocent. And upon reading that, she conveyed everything to us, my family, my sibling. And I remember how passionate she was about it, how convinced she was. And so then, of course, I always took my mother's word as pretty much gospel, so I was like, okay, so then you must be innocent. Of course, once you get older and you start coming into your own, you want to look at things.
Sorry, 1 second. I was asked a question in chat, and I should answer that first. Lytoid, this was the question I asked earlier. I know this is off topic, but are you aware of a woman who called 911 on the night of the murders who reported OJ ran her off the road just up the street from the murder scene? She said she thought he was drunk because he looked crazed. Marcia Clark decided not to use you as a witness because she did a paid interview with the news program. I was not aware of that. It doesn't, I mean, it could be true. I know that there was, there was it was a low speed, but there was like a police chase. I know after this as well. And there was a drug dealer who testified, or no, he didn't testify, but he said that he had sold him meth ahead of time, which it's hard to tell the credibility of a drug dealer, honestly. Probably, I'm willing to accept that's probably not, could be not true, but it could be true. I mean, a drug dealer is saying he did it. I don't know.
For yourself, and I did.
Yeah, why would he lie about that? Yeah, why would a drug dealer, now that I think about it, why would a drug dealer lie about, like, he didn't sell him meth, but he actually did sell him meth? Like, what drug dealer wants to admit to selling meth if he didn't do it? Fame, maybe? I was gonna say, well, it seems like a dumb thing to risk your life over, but like he's also a drug dealer, so he could be risking his life over. Look, meth dealers, in my experience, are not the most complex thinkers. Really, I'm just gonna say. It wouldn't surprise me if maybe in some meth episode he's like, "Oh, this is a big trial. I sold him meth." I could see that happening, frankly. But it's evidence. It's evidence that dude was on meth. Is that specific thing beyond a reasonable doubt? No, but it's plausible.
With the bias and slant already that was given to me by my mother. But I think for myself, and I think I went to the thing open-minded, trying to read this information. Doing all the research I could. I started watching documentaries, started reading all these things. It gave me a really clear understanding of the trial. And so around that time, I want to say it was like 2018, 2017, I started posting, and I remember posting very clearly, there is no evidence that OJ.
So he's posting in 2018. So I want to be clear here for a second. This is important, and the reason why this is important is he's been posting 2018. He's been making affirmative posts, right? And he hasn't watched the whole trial. He hasn't even read the Wikipedia. Since 2018, which has been 6 years, he has watched some snippets of YouTube videos. 6 years. Look, I had like 2 weeks to learn about this. I had less than 2 weeks to learn about this because I was busy with other shit too. So I read all through everything, like over the course of a period of time much, much, much shorter than 6 years. Holy shit, motherfucker! Whoa, 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 sir, ma'am, I don't know, whatever your gender is. Jesus, Kerrigan, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Holy shit. 10 tier 1 subs. That is what's up. As soon as I get some kind of chat rewards, you are gonna. I'm writing your name down, Kerrigan. Once I get some kind of chat rewards, I'm gonna figure out some way of getting them to you. Okay. Very, very cool. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Good shit. All right. Wow. Damn, Aiko. That sucks. Left out. All right, let's keep going.
O.J. Simpson is guilty changed my mind. And it was really funny because people started coming to me and like, kind of debating it a little bit. And this is before I was like generating content and recording these conversations. But I just remember it forcing me to go back and look at more information just to be ready for the next one. Stronger. I haven't reviewed any
more information, aka YouTube clips.
Footage at all. I'm just gonna go off of the top of my head, but I feel pretty freaking confident. One of the things that bothers me is that the opinion on O.J. Simpson has changed over time. There's a post by the Washington Post.
This is what I was referring to before, by the way, about like over time, like even white people and black people now agree that he fucking did it. A lot of this has to do with an increase in trust in DNA evidence.
Decades later, black and white Americans finally agree on O.J. Simpson's guilt. That bothers me. I'll explain why as the conversation goes on. But they then provide a stat.
Also, thank you, Kerrigan, for giving a sub to Aiko. That was so heartwarming. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm sure Aiko does too.
And the stat shows where black and white fell on the O.J. Simpson verdict. In 1994, about 22% of black people thought that O.J. Simpson was guilty. In 2015, 57% of black people thought he was guilty. The contrary for white people, even.
Thanks for the bits, Feder. I'm gonna keep doing it. I every time. Feder, really appreciate the bits. Thanks. As always, really do appreciate it.
In 1994, 63% of them thought he was guilty, and 83% thought he was guilty in 2015. Of course, those numbers have probably increased over time since then. And I understand why. This takes me to the point where my friend was asking me to watch this thing with Cuba Gooding Jr. He was saying it's extremely well shot, it's extremely really good. It was my boy Nines. He was saying, man, you gotta watch this. It's like, I mean, even if it's not accurate, it's really good. And I said, no, it would be incredibly offensive too, because I know what they're doing when they release these types of things. They release these things with enough nebulous and gray area so that people who are watching it, who are familiar with the case, begin to get the sense that they are familiar enough with the case because of what was put inside the television, which is.
I don't actually even disagree with this point. This specific point of like there is a trend of people repackaging old cases with a lot less context into like dramas and then releasing them, and then people who watch those dramas think they know everything about the case, right? Like making a murderer. He's referencing something with OJ as well. I haven't seen it, and he hasn't either. So, same thing with the trial itself, and other kind of like dramatizations that are just inaccurate, right? Okay, but Stephen Avery is almost definitely innocent. I don't know. I haven't done a deep dive on that one yet, so I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm not just going to jump to conclusions. I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm leaning towards guilty, honestly, but I can't say that as definitively. But yeah, generally speaking, you shouldn't get your facts from a drama. I think this is. You should get your facts from. Get your facts from Wikipedia. It would be better than a drama at the very least.
Which is mostly true, and so then because of that, they start to believe things that aren't true, that are complete misrepresentations, and then they actually walk away believing they're informed about the trial. I know most people won't admit it in the comments, but the vast majority of people that think he's guilty never watched the trial, don't know really any of the.
The vast majority of people who think he's guilty have never watched the trial. The vast majority of people have never watched the trial, including Fanatiq. The vast majority of people who think he's guilty. The vast majority of people who don't think he's guilty. Both of these groups have not watched the trial. Like the vast majority of them have not watched the trial. There's only a small percentage of people at this point in time, I'm sure, that actually watched every single second of the trial. This is a disingenuous point.
He's about the evidence. It's offensive. You're spinning the narrative. It's literal propaganda, and it's false. And so it was offensive to me. And at first he was like, I mean, even you can watch it for entertainment. And so I picked what was his favorite.
I don't care what's offensive to you.
Conspiracy at the time, and I said, okay, imagine if someone made a conspiracy. Decided to make film. The film was slanted in the direction against your belief in this thing, and it was still really well. It was well shot. It was good. Directed well. The script was good, but that they were selling this thing. Would that offend you? Would that bother you? He was like, yeah, of course it would. That's so false. And I said, that's exactly where I'm coming from. He's like, I get it. I understand. That was the end of that conversation. I never watched it. The reason why I normally strayed away from the phrase.
Okay, I agree that he shouldn't watch it, and I wouldn't either. At least for a debate. Maybe I'd watch it if I want to be entertained.
O.J. Simpson is innocent. I typically use the phrase that there is no evidence to convict O.J. Simpson. And the reason why I think these two.
There's no evidence to convict O.J. Simpson. This is like a little like meandering point a little bit. So, and this is just the lawyer in me because again, I'm a licensed attorney talking about a criminal case. There is plenty of evidence to convict O.J. Simpson, even if you think that he's not guilty. Okay, that's important to emphasize. Evidence is like defined as anything that makes a result more likely than otherwise. So, like, evidence is very broad. There absolutely is evidence, according to the legal standards, to convict him. That evidence was brought forward by the prosecution. You can say it wasn't enough. You can say, well, fuck, that's not enough evidence. I need more evidence. You could do that. That's fine. There's still evidence, obviously. What have I told you? That cell phone records as well as testimony. If this is about the Avery thing, I'm just totally like an O.J. Simpson world right now. I got no clue as to the Avery thing. I'll have to do some kind of like obsessive deep dive in that later. We can do it. We can have a stream on that, Parallax, if you'd like, and you can educate me on the facts of the Stephen Avery trial. I actually do trust you to be more straightforward, more honest in presenting the evidence to me than Fanatiq. So, yeah, we can do that. And yeah, I'll be open. I'll be open to that.
Two things are distinctions because one is to argue something that I can prove, and to prove that he's innocent is to prove a negative. Prove that he did not do this thing.
To prove that he's innocent is to prove a negative. True. You don't prove people innocent. The prosecution has to prove them guilty. In this case, beyond a reasonable doubt.
And it's more difficult to do. It's very difficult to prove negative. You can do it sometimes. Idiots will tell you can't prove a negative, they're morons. But you can do it sometimes. And so I always wanted to stay on side that's more defensible, which is there's no evidence to convict O.J. Simpson. And in fact, that was what the defense used. You see, immediately after she was discovered dead, the very first thing the police officers did was they went immediately to O.J. Simpson's house. They immediately suspected it with zero evidence.
Immediately went to O.J. Simpson's house. I mean, they went to his house shortly afterwards. Sure.
And zero information. They used the argument that the reason why they needed to go to his house and get into his property was to protect him from the killer, because the killer might be trying to kill OJ as well. Once they got onto his
no. It's not true. It's not true. What happened was Nicole Brown's kids were in the house still, who were, I'm pretty sure, also OJ's kids. They were OJ's kids, sorry. And the cops were going to OJ's house to notify him because he needed to get the kids because their mother was just murdered. And when they got to the house, and also to notify him, by the way, that his ex-wife had been murdered. And when they got to the house, they saw blood stains on the door of the white Bronco. So they saw blood on the car right outside the house. And then they rang the doorbell for like 30 minutes. They were standing outside for like 30 minutes and they weren't getting an answer. So his car is there. There's blood on the car and nobody's answering the door. So they thought maybe he's hurt. Maybe somebody is hurt in the house if there's a car here with blood on it and nobody's answering the door. This is a very reasonable thing for police officers to do. And this is the reason why the evidence wasn't excluded from the trial, despite the fact that they did go onto the property without a search warrant. But you get to go onto properties without search warrants if there's exigent circumstances. If you believe somebody might be in danger or somebody may be hurt and might need medical attention. If you see blood stains on a car door and nobody's answering the door, this can be enough to go inside of a place, go inside of otherwise a property that you couldn't search to go see if someone's hurt or if everyone's okay. This is the concept behind welfare checks, by the way. This happens all the time. So the fact that there was blood on the door of the car is being completely omitted. And the fact that they stood outside for 30 minutes is being completely omitted because Fanatiq is trying to make this look as bad as possible because he's motivated. This is motivated reasoning.
Property. Then they found a bloody glove, and then they were able.
They did find the bloody glove in the yard after 30 minutes, and they went inside, or went inside the yard at least. They hopped the fence.
to say, okay, no, now we need to make him the suspect. So obviously that bloody glove should be inadmissible because you had no reason to be on his property. You didn't have a search warrant and you did search his property. Yeah, you found the glove and you were able to search his car. You found all these things based off of the idea that you were supposedly trying to protect him, but yet without a warrant. And if that doesn't hold up, it's not supposed to.
Okay. We have a non-lawyer here giving legal advice. That doesn't hold up. He's wrong. Don't listen to him. He's giving you legal advice and making legal fact statements that are incorrect. Obviously, I just explained the exigent circumstances that allow police officers to be able to go into property that they otherwise wouldn't be able to without a search warrant. And if they go on and they find a bunch of evidence leading of a crime, they don't have to just ignore it, despite the fact that they didn't have a search warrant. So Fanatiq's just wrong. I'm telling you with authority because I am an authority on this topic.
Be admissible. One of the main lawyers for the defense said that no judge was going to throw out that bloody glove because it would have been suicide, because being a judge is particularly political. Here, I'll read it to you. First, he says, well, there's always been some doubt about how they found the glove, but the claim is LAPD Detective Mark Furman was climbing around the back and...
This is the defense attorney, by the way, the person who's tasked with who's paid by O.J. Simpson and is tasked with being as zealous of an advocate as possible for O.J. Simpson. Just keep that in mind. Fanatiq is reading it like it's a fact. It's an opinion from a completely biased, admittedly biased source.
And he discovered the bloody glove and made this miraculous finding. There were a number of policemen, all of whom were acting in concert. There were policemen like Detective Philip Van Adder, who had access to the blood samples, and there was Furman, and there were others. They had a common goal, and their goal was to convict the men who they honestly in their hearts believed were responsible. They weren't trying to frame somebody based on his race. They weren't trying to put somebody in jail who they thought was innocent. That never occurred. They, in their own heart of hearts, knew who the guilty person was. They also knew that there were barriers, legal and constitutional barriers to achieving justice, which is getting the right person. And so they were prepared to circumvent those barriers. And here's the part
Of course, the defense attorney would say that.
Specifically related to the glove. There is no elected judge in the state of California who would have thrown out the bloody glove, even though the law required them to do so. There isn't an honest judge in the state of California who wants to be reelected or promoted who would have thrown out the major piece of evidence in the O.J. Simpson case. That would have been the right thing to do, but it never would have occurred to a political judge. And judges are by their nature political. To become the worst villain in California history, namely the man or woman responsible for framing guilty.
Judges are political to some extent because they're elected. I think we've talked about this on stream before, that like near their re-election, judges will give harsher sentences to like disgusting crimes, like child predators or like murderers and stuff, because they want to look good for their re-election. They don't want to look like they're letting criminals off the hook easy. That's real. That's a real thing, and you can be careful. I mean, be suspicious about that. Nope, I don't have a problem with you being suspicious about that. But in this case, what's happening is we are not looking at the actual reasons why they searched, the actual reasonable reasons why they searched and why the glove was included in the evidence. And he's just going off of a speculation that the judge was, in this case, that Judge Ito was acting biased, which there is no evidence for. There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence that the glove wasn't allowed because he was being biased. There's actually evidence to the contrary, which is that I think it's pretty reasonable that the police officers actually searched that place following the blood, seeing the blood stain on the car and waiting for 30 minutes.
They knew that they had this thing. That's what they truly believed they were going to be able to get away. And so they felt like they were going to find a mountain of evidence, but obviously there's plenty of things that have talked about how absolutely terrible they hit this case. They didn't like properly insulate the crime scene. They had their own footprints everywhere over the crime scene. They tracked blood in different places that wasn't supposed to. There was just everything.
They didn't properly insulate the crime scene. I think he's referring to the fact they didn't always change gloves between measuring blood samples. Technically, you're supposed to do that to avoid cross-contamination. But the DNA matches like came back to OJ, Nicole, and Goldman, and nobody else. So the two dead people and like the one suspect. So if there was another suspect, and like then that could be a huge problem, right? Because if there's another potential, like if let's say they found two DNA matches, like for like another suspect or like somebody else, an unknown party, they found the DNA of some unknown human being that could have been there. Yeah, like the cross contamination there could have been huge, but that's not what they found.
You could do wrong. They did. On top.
And stop walking around. There were obviously detectives walking around, but that doesn't change the fact that the footprints, that like the bloody footprints themselves, were like that was still valid evidence. There was no indication that like they were just like stomping in the blood and like leaving bloody footprints everywhere. It's just, yeah, I don't know what's going on here now.
Top of the fact that the police chief at the time was racist, and one of the lead detectives on this case was an outed white supremacist racist. And so then.
Galactoid, just for playing the debate. I was here a couple hours ago watching it. We are watching an old video that Fanatiq made on this exact debate, and I'm just going through and debunking everything because I wanted to do that in a debate with him, but he kicked me out early. He kicked me out after only an hour, as we were scheduled for 2 hours. So I am obsessive about this. Mike, and I'm going to go through each and every point.
The fact that the police chief at the time was racist and one of the lead
Chief of police at the time was racist.
detectives on this case was an outed white supremacist racist.
Outed white supremacist racist. Right there, what you just heard, that's Fanatiq's motivation. It's obvious.
And so then they just didn't really have a good case to stand on. So of course, when you first mentioned to people, hey, there's no evidence to convict OJ, most people would immediately say, what about the blood? So I'll kind of briefly walk you through why blood is not good evidence to convict OJ. It was an extremely bloody crime scene, extremely. And of course, there was blood everywhere, and they took photos of everything, and then they took a bunch of samples. And of course, they drew blood from OJ Simpson, and then they used that blood to compare to the samples. Well, the problem was, originally, out of all of the samples that they collect, every single blood sample that they collected from the crime scene had environmental degradation.
Oh my God.
Blood to compare to the samples. Well, the problem was, originally, out of all of the samples that they collect, every single blood sample.
Every single blood sample, he's saying. Bro, what? He's saying it even strong. Like, he's saying it just like, surely he said it just as strong at the beginning of the debate. Like, maybe he started like weaning off the end. But he's saying it just as strong right here too. Every single sample was degraded.
Sample that they collected from the crime scene had environmental degradation. You see, to get DNA from blood, it just need, you can get it, but then eventually the environment will beat up against that blood until eventually there's no sunlight.
Eventually, it takes like many months for this to happen, according to the study that I linked on Twitter. You can all go look at it.
Too much sunlight can cause it. Too much just exposure can cause it. And so what happened was there was
Sunlight is one thing that can cause it, yes, but obviously, like I've said, it takes months, and the blood samples were collected from June 13th, the day of the murder.
so much degradation that they couldn't get it. Then they couldn't do anything with it because it was a crime that happened outside in the element.
This is wrong. They did do something with it. They tested it, and it tested positive for O.J. Simpson's DNA. This is false.
It was exposed. They just couldn't get anything from it, so they weren't able to tie that blood to anything. Well,
it's not true. They were able to tie it to the DNA of O.J. Simpson and Nicole Brown and Goldman. This is, you can all go read the Wikipedia, look at the testimony, all the transcripts. You can all find this. This is just lies.
Well, about 3 weeks later, they revisit the crime scene and then they find blood. This blood has way more DNA count.
They did revisit and collect more blood samples, yes.
And it doesn't have any of, all,most none of the environmental degradation. And then using that blood, they're able to go ahead and test it against O.J. Simpson's blood and say, hey, this blood is the same. So then you're like, okay, so we should do dead to rights. Well, the defense's argument was that the blood had.
There was no, no major part in the case was like measuring the level of environmental degradation of the different blood samples. The blood samples were fine. The ones that were collected on June 13th were fine.
Thing called EDTA, which is a preserving agent. EDTA is a preserving agent that you can find in detergent.
EDTA is indeed a preserving agent. It's found in detergent, fast food, including McDonald's, which O.J. Simpson ate earlier that night.
You'll find it, you'll absorb it in some of the food you eat, but you'll get it in like parts per billion. Parts per billion. It's extremely, extremely, extremely small amounts that you'll find in people's blood. Well, in O.J. Simpson's blood, you have parts per million. Well,
no, you can find it in parts per million in human beings. One of the agents in the case himself, tested his blood, and it was parts per million. There's 2 studies indicating that the baseline for human beings is about 1,500 parts per million, not parts per billion. So this is also incorrect information. This is false.
Parts per million is lethal. It's a preserving agent, and it's going to be
Parts per million is not lethal. This is false. This is misinformation.
the tubes that they use in order to keep blood in order to be able to keep it preserved, so they'll be able to test it later on and so on and so forth in those labs. You'll also find it in things like in blood transfusions, because of course that blood is being preserved, stuff that's in the back. So it's a preserving agent. That's the only place that you'll find these parts per million.
So this doesn't make any sense actually when I'm just thinking about it. He's saying that it exists in blood transfusions, but he just said that, and correct somebody if I'm saying something stupid right here, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. If he's saying that if you have parts per million in your blood, it'll kill you, and you can find parts per million in blood transfusions, and the blood transfusions involve injecting blood into you, wouldn't there be a risk of the parts per million in the blood transfusion raising your own blood content 2 parts per million, thus killing you, thus making blood transfusions lethal? You're not replacing your whole blood supply. I get that. But you're replacing some significant percentage of your blood supply, and there is a massive gap between parts per million and parts per billion, right? A million is not half of a billion. We're talking about a fraction. So if we have to replace here, I can just Google this. Let's find out right now. So here's one massive transfusion replacement of 50% of total blood volume. So 50%. If you replaced 50% of your total blood with a blood transfusion that involved blood that had parts per million of EDTA, and parts per million will kill you, then he's saying that large blood transfusions of 50%, or even much less than that, but 50%, we'll just go off of that. He's saying that's lethal, which is directly contradicted by the fact that people get blood transfusions of 50% all the time. So this statement is self-contradictory. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yes. But then when you're mixing that blood with the person's raw blood, of course, if their regular blood is part per billion, then like basically it goes down to where you're again at parts per billion. Well,
Stills per part per billion, but that doesn't make any sense if you have people who get their blood transfusions that are 50% of their blood. It doesn't distill down to parts per billion from parts per million. It doesn't make any sense.
In this O.J. Simpson thing, they found all of that blood with parts per million, meaning that it had to have been from something that was preserved, which is what leads people to believe that it was planted. But that alone would
It's not true. Human beings can have blood with EDTA in parts per million.
be enough to fully say for sure that it's planted. But then, of course, then there were photographs. You see, some of the detectives, I think one of their names was Detective Funk. He looked at that blood, and he was the one that discovered some of these things, and was saying, hey, here's this blood, and we got to get it. And was able to tie that to OJ. The problem was that the blood that he found, where he came 3 weeks later with no environmental degradation, with way higher DNA counts, such that they were able to get this information, and those spots weren't there before. You see, what the defense did was
This was a specific photograph that the DNA that the defense counsel took and had, and there was a different photograph from a different angle that showed the exact blood spots that Fung was talking about, that he got the blood from. So there was a different photograph. Literally, it was just the specific photograph didn't appear to show it, but the other photograph did.
took the photographs of the crime scene and then showed it to him and said, okay, so here's the marks. You have to identify each of those spots they're marking. Here's the marks of where you found the blood, okay? And here's a photograph of the crime scene prior to this date, which was like 3.5 weeks prior. And there's no blood there. But where's the blood stain? It wasn't there. And at first he was trying to like, why, I'm not sure. And so he was like, hey, this was the exact same place. There's no blood. But now we got the new photo and the blood is there. Clearly, you don't see it in this photo. And is this photo visible in the same area? And of course, he finally had to say, okay, it doesn't appear to be in this photo. You can't just say it wasn't there. It's just, no, it doesn't appear to be in this photo. To put it plainly, imagine you take a picture.
He's not bringing up the photo that shows the blood.
Picture of your desk, and there's no mark there. And then you come back 3.5 weeks later, and you take a picture of the desk, and there's a mark there. But we have both of the photographs.
Wait, hold on. The photo that shows the blood there is not an older photo. It's from the June 13th. It's from the day of the murder. It's from a different angle, and it shows the blood there. That's important to note. It's not just like an older photograph. It's a photograph from the same time.
And you say, well, no, the mark has always been there. Well, the mark couldn't have always been there.
If you think I'm wrong, read the Wikipedia. I distinctly remember reading that. I can even bring it up again.
Yeah, because it wasn't in that first photograph, right? Like, and so there's like, well, it must have either come after. I can't think of another explanation. Or maybe the first photograph just missed it. But of course, these were pretty good photographs, and it was
The first photograph did miss it.
very clear. They had multiple at the crime scene. They did photograph from
They did have multiple photographs, and one of the photographs did show the blood on the back gate, exactly where Detective Fung took it from.
every angle. They were all brand new things. And then, of course, like I said, the environmental degradation wasn't there. Of course, the presence of ETA
Environmental degradation, he keeps mentioning that. There's nothing he can point to about that.
was there.
Supposedly has been out there from June 12th to July 3rd. And
This is Barry Scheck. He is the defense attorney for O.J. Simpson. He cannot be trusted as an expert on science or blood testimony.
there's no question. Sunlight degrades DNA. Moisture and bacteria degrade DNA.
These are what's known in the industry as like contextless truths, where technically this is correct, right? Sunlight and bacteria and fungus and all these things, they can break down DNA over time, but it doesn't happen the day of. All the DNA is not gonna be broken down 3 weeks later. It wouldn't surprise me if after several months there was DNA, perhaps even for years. So this is technically, these are the things that can break down DNA, but the timeline is being completely ignored in order to bolster the defense's position.
Why are these concentrations so much higher? And another point. There's DNA concentrations, but there's also a separate test, as you've learned, where we look at those yield judges for degradation. These samples are not
This is him talking out of his ass.
degraded.
So then that meant that blood was gone. But then that means then, if that one spot was not there originally, then it had to have gotten there somehow, which would lead you to believe that it was planted. Reasonable take. But then in order for it to be planted, then that means then, who would have had access to that blood? Well, when O.J. Simpson's blood was drawn, instead of the person immediately going upstairs to like drop it off, like to the proper department, instead he immediately left and went to the crime scene with the blood. It's literally
This part is right. Apparently he left it to bring the blood to somebody else that was at the crime scene. It remained sealed. Was it Fung? It was one of the detectives, and they testified that it was sealed and that like they didn't tamper with it. But he shouldn't have brought it to the crime scene. I mean, that's just true. He should have brought it directly to the lab. This is not within normal protocol. This was, I don't know why he did it. He shouldn't have done it. It's not evidence. It is evidence. It is evidence of tampering, I suppose. But in of itself, it's not definitive evidence, and especially given that there's no evidence that the bag was actually opened and anything specifically was tampered with. At most, you could say it's like some kind of circumstantial evidence that could work with like other evidence to show some kind of tampering, but there's no other evidence that even comes close to like indicate tampering. So it doesn't work on itself to show that like the blood was actually tampered with.
Happened. Not my opinion. Fact. They took the drawn blood and went to the crime scene and was walking around with that blood for over an hour and a half before that.
Yes, this is what happened. Yep.
Turned in. It would have taken less than 3 minutes to just draw the blood and drop it off at the lab. Who does that? Why would you do that? And then, of course, they decide, okay, well, when they drop the blood off to the lab, and the lab has to report exactly how much blood was drawn, the amount that the lab reported was less than the amount that was drawn.
If you recall from the testimony,
Yeah, he said approximately 8, and then the reports indicated 6.5, and he said, well, 6.5. This happens all the time. This happens all the fucking time. I don't find this particularly convincing that they took 1.5 milliliters, which, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, how much are we really talking here? $1.5 million. This is a very small amount. Yeah, I don't know what happened here. It very well could be that he said it, well, approximately 8. That's what I saw it as. Well, no, 6.5. It was actually 1.5 off. Oh, well, I guess I did take 6.5. I guess that's actually what it was. There was some other theories that I read of like there could be loss of 1.5 from different instruments that were being used to test, or even the pipette that was used to transfer the blood. Could happen, but yeah.
the first thing that happened is that Mr. Yamauchi got the blood and he stuck in a pipette. It takes 1 mil. We created the Fitzco card. So that's 1 mil. The next thing that happens, that's on June 14th. On June 21st, toxicology gets it. And toxicology does things in an appropriate way. They measured how much blood was in the tube. They take a tube, as Mr. Matheson described it, you fill it with water, you look at the other tube and you make a measurement. And they measured it to be 5.5. Now, if it's 5.5, and we started with 8 cc's, and Yamauchi took 1, there's 1.5 missing.
They get a testimony from the guy who drew the blood, who was very anti-OJ, and he says, very confidently,
Mr. Simpson.
Approximately 8 cc's.
You say approximately, you did not measure the amount?
Well, it could have been 7.9 or it could have been 8.1. How you looked at the syringe, looked at about 8 cc's. I would do the from his
I know exactly how much blood I draw. I draw it the same way every time. I'm exactly sure it was exactly this amount. And so then, of course, once you're on record saying that under oath, confidently.
Mr. Simpson.
Is that what he said?
8 cc's.
You say approximately, you did not measure the amount?
You said approximately. Did you not measure the amount?
Well, it could have been 7.9 or it could have been
It could have been 7.9. It could have been 8.1.
8.1. How you looked at the syringe, looked at about 8 cc's.
I actually have to like watch this at 1 time speed. Sorry, guys. 1 second.
Well, it could have been 7.9 or it could have been 8.1. How you looked at the syringe and looked at about 8 cc's. I went through the needle from his arm.
I know exactly.
Whoa! This is just a direct like from the own video. Hold on. Let's watch the video one more time that is cited in Fanatiq's own video that he's obviously spent a lot of time producing because it's well produced. Surely he's not going to misrepresent the clip of the video that he's just showing right now.
The blood, who was very anti-OJ. And
Surely not.
Very confident.
Mr. Simpson.
Approximately 8 cc's.
Approximately 8 cc's.
You say approximately, you did not measure the amount?
You said approximately. You did not measure the amount.
Well, it could have been 7.9 or it could have been 8.1.
It could have been 7.9. It could have been 8.1.
How you looked at the syringe and looked at about 8 cc's.
I just looked at the syringe and it looked about 8 cc's.
I went through the needle from his arm.
I know
I went through the needle and then I'm guessing from his arm is what he's about to say.
exactly how much blood I draw.
I know exactly how much blood I draw. He never said that. We just listened to it. Didn't we just listen to it? Am I having a stroke right now? Is that what he said? Did he specifically just say, I know exactly how much blood I draw? It's 8. It is 8. Did he even use the word exactly? If you're going to say that he said the word exactly, why not include that in the clip? He didn't say it. This is just a flat out like misrepresentation of what the video just said. He never even used the word exactly. He said, I just looked at it. It could be around there. And he was off. Oh my fucking gee. See, this is why you can't take this guy like you can't take what he says as as true. Because he told me even there during the brief debate that we had that he really emphasized how exactly sure he was. But when I listen to that, he doesn't use the word exactly. He seems actually pretty not sure about exactly how much he took. He's saying, I just kind of looked at it. I think that's what he says. I just kind of looked at it. It could be around there, approximately. Jesus Christ.
Draw it the same way every time. I'm exactly sure it was exactly this amount. And so then, of course, once you're
exactly sure it's exactly this amount. Well, hold on. So he's saying that I'm uneducated for not like watching YouTube clips. He's saying I'm uneducated for like not watching YouTube clips, but when the YouTube clips that he includes in his own video, what he says doesn't even reflect what the YouTube clips show. So I don't even know if like he's retaining the information that he's getting from watching the YouTube clips themselves. And he's not reading the Wikipedia or any of like the articles associated with the Wikipedia. So I don't know what evidence he's going off of at this point, besides maybe like what his mom told him. I think that's what he said at the beginning, that his mom watched some or read some book and like Johnny Cochran's book and really knew it and then told him and now he's sure. It seems to be where a lot of this is coming from, I think, probably.
that under oath. Then we go to you and you say, well, this is what they reported. What happened to the rest of it? Later on, he then goes and says, I made a mistake.
That was a little statement. I looked at it, I should say, it looked like it was enough, which it was enough. The 8 cc's, I was wrong in that 8 cc's altogether.
Before he was 100%.
I was wrong on that 8 cc's altogether. Okay. Although, again, he doesn't seem that sure of it when he's actually testifying.
Positive. But once, of course, OJ was not guilty, and of course, his
He
testimony
was not absolutely positive based on the clip unless you present a different clip in which he's like way more positive, the one that you included doesn't show that.
was used against the prosecution. Then he changed his story. Well, I'm not entirely sure. Then at this point now, we know blood is missing. There was a sock. A sock had blood on it. I believe blood was planted, and I think the evidence is pretty obvious that blood was planted. There was a drop of
The evidence is not obvious that blood was planted.
blood on the handle of the glove. There was a drop of blood on the glove. There was a drop of blood on a post. There was like just literal physical drops. It was a crazily bloody crime scene, but there was literal physical drops at each individual place. Well, one of the things that they found blood on was a sock. Think about it this way. If I poured blood onto a sock while it's not being worn, the blood is going to seep through to the other end of the sock, right? That's what happened with the blood. They were able to show if the person was wearing the sock, then blood can't land on the sock, go through the leg, and bleed to the other side. But it did on the sock, which means that the only time that blood could have been applied would be when it wasn't being worn.
Yeah. So the guy who did that testimony talking about that sock and how like it couldn't bleed through if it wasn't being worn also agreed that it could bleed through from other things, such as like picking up the sock and like pinching it in that area where the blood is, and so it gets in the other side. Or when the DNA was being collected, it could have bled like while being handled or swabbed. It could have bled into the other side of the sock. And the same guy who talked about the blood seepage from one side of the sock to the other also denied. He called it some variation of absurd. That the cops tampered with the evidence. He was very much, and despite the fact that he was a defense witness, by the way, the defense called him. He said it was absurd, and he said that he denied saying that the cops tampered with anything.
Agent Mart says, no, I can't really say because I would expect there to be more EDTA in a sample left for 3 weeks on the back gates or on a sock, that I'm seeing 6 months later. But he never did a single experiment to find out how much you would expect to get from stains that are months old and are subjected to environmental insults. And you saw that there were quantitation problems when they tested it. It would go up and down.
The sock in his house, was that also suffering from environmental degradation? I thought it was sunlight and microbes. I mean, I guess there's microbes. Only blood perfectly preserved in a fucking test tube. That's the only blood that could be tested. Everything else is tainted. It's all old. You can't.
I mean, a good example, I have a sock here. A good example. Say I took this sock and I put a hole through the sock. Well, if there's a symmetrical hole, like that comes out on the other side, then that means the sock couldn't have been being worn at the time, right? Because in order for it to go through, it can't be worn. And that's where the blood was on this freaking sock. Then it's like, well, clearly it wasn't being worn. And yet again, this blood has EDTA in parts per million, which would be lethal, according
EDTA in parts per million is not lethal. He's wrong.
to their expert.
Would you agree that if
The defense expert said that, and he's wrong. And then he was disproven by the EPA article that was presented to him by the prosecution. I'm going to keep repeating this every fucking time it gets brought up.
Someone had 2,000 parts per million EPA in their blood, they did. Well, for any sustained period of time.
So then you know, okay,
Roger Martz, you can tell he cut it off just as he was explaining himself. Was this the guy? Yeah, Agent Martz. This was the guy who took his own blood and tested it, and it was parts per million, by the way. This is the dude. It's Fanatiq leaves that part out.
For any sustained period of time.
so then you know, okay, blood has been planted without a doubt. You got blood that's been soaking through the shit.
Blood has been planted without a doubt. So he's willing to say that blood has been planted without a doubt, but he's not willing to say that there's even a doubt as to O.J. Simpson. There's no evidence. There's no evidence that O.J. Simpson did it, but without a doubt, the blood was planted. By the way, saying the blood was planted is a affirmative claim, by the way. He was saying before that it's really hard to prove a negative claim, but he's making a very positive claim here. The blood was planted, and he's saying that it was planted without a doubt. Crazy.
Shouldn't have. You got blood that's missing, right? That's being recorded in the lab. You got the blood. They obviously know that the blood was down at the crime scene for over an hour and a half, and then you have the presence of the EDTA, and you have blood that is in spots that it wasn't according to photographic evidence. Blood is out the window. That's normally the most
Blood is not out the window. This is a lie.
common piece of evidence. I'm not going to relitigate the entire trial. My main point is what the defense's strategy was to put prosecutors
You're not going to relitigate the entire trial because you haven't watched the entire trial, and you really don't know anything about the trial besides what your mom told you and a few clips from YouTube.
and the police on trial because the police acted. The police truly planted evidence. Now you might say that their motivation was because they truly believed OJ was guilty.
There's no evidence that the police planted evidence.
And so they were trying to do the quote-unquote right thing, despite the Constitution. But we all have a belief that says
You're speculating as to the motives of something that there's no evidence for.
we're innocent until proven guilty. All of us. I would think so. But what we've discovered is that for plenty of people, they say that, but they don't actually believe it. Because in the O.J. Simpson trial, that's exactly what happened. You were supposed to be beyond a reasonable doubt. And of course, they couldn't come to any conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt because of all the different ways those people act. You can't even...
No, it was because the jury was dumb. I agree with the general idea that we should have high standards for criminal trials, but I mean, this was the easiest fucking case for the prosecutors to win, and it was probably a mix of them bungling it and the defense being made up of incredibly talented lawyers and the jury being very stupid.
immediately go and get this evidence of this bloody glove, which wasn't O.J. Simpson's because his hand literally couldn't fit inside of it.
This
Literally couldn't fit inside of it.
literally couldn't fit inside of it. Literally couldn't fit inside of it.
Bloody glove, which wasn't O.J. Simpson's because his hand...
The video's like... Are the rest of you seeing this? Like, the videos are clearly showing the opposite of, like, what he says. His hand's, like, pretty much in the glove. He could clearly be faking it. There's another pair of gloves underneath. The gloves could... I mean, it's possibly the gloves could have shranken, but, like, from what I'm seeing here...
hand literally couldn't fit inside of it.
The fingers are moving. He could have killed somebody in those gloves.
You can't go and get that evidence, right? So then it's okay, so that doesn't work. You can't plant blood. You can't lie about his whereabouts. They did everything they could to plant evidence and fake this thing.
He lie about his whereabouts. I don't know if there was mention at all before.
There's a quote from Alan Dershowitz, who was part of the defense, and I think he really sums it up really well.
Again, another quote from the defense lawyers who are tasked with defending their client. Dershowitz is a well-known attorney, very talented, but obviously he's going to be biased towards his client. He's a lawyer. He has to be.
The problem with this case is that the system worked, and it works too well. It works too well because it showed what the defense is capable of doing if they have the ability to use all of the constitutional protections that are given them by the Bill of Rights and by constitutional...
No, the gloves shrank. They tried it with a new pair and it fit. It could be true. He also had his hand mostly in that glove, and I wouldn't be surprising if he would have been able to kill somebody with it. That's just what I see in the video, at least. If you're telling me that I'm being stupid, Aiko, I trust you. I could be wrong on that, but that's clearly what it seems to show in the video.
And other statutory rules. It showed what can happen if the defense has access to the best experts and good lawyers, experts in various other scientific areas. So it showed that the system can work very well, and that in fact the system will operate on the principle of better 10 guilty go free than 1 innocent be wrong.
By the way, something we didn't even get into, the best experts or whatever. There were 2 experts. I'll bring them up after we're done with the video. That were taught they directly contradicted the defense's tactics on the very general questions, and then they just didn't bring them. They didn't bring those witnesses. So a lot of the experts, several of the experts at least, they just didn't use because the testimony they gave was actually contrary to what the defense's theory of the case was.
convicted. And you know what? The public doesn't like the system. The public much prefers the old system. The old system in which the prosecution really doesn't have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution really doesn't have to abide by the Constitution. The prosecution really doesn't have to play fair with all the evidence. The public saw the system working, and they didn't like it. And I genuinely believe that to be true. Another thing that I've heard is people mention one of the testimonies of one of the jurors in which she said specifically that she was getting revenge for Rodney King. Like one
Yeah, she was.
person out of 12. And they say, okay, so
1% out of 12 matters because, if I'm not mistaken, 1% out of 12 in California, that's going to be a hung jury, which would allow the prosecution to try the case again. I'm not a lawyer in California, and I know that there has been a recent Supreme Court ruling on this in 2020, which basically like standardizes. And I'm pretty sure the only two states that had a different system was like Louisiana and Washington. I don't think California was listed. So one juror matters. It does.
this was a black woman. And I think there were 8 black women in the jury. 4 of the people weren't black women. 4 of the people were white, and they came to the same.
If you can count 2 Hispanics as white and a Native American, sure.
conclusion. It would be a mistrial if there was literally just one dissenter.
But does Fanatiq believe Asians are like white adjacent or not? I know Joe Lewis does. I don't know if Fanatiq does or not.
So if one person said, no, I think he's guilty, it's over. So you can try to blame it on the racism of black women, but then what about the other 4 non-black that still found him not guilty? I think the evidence wasn't there. It just wasn't. And anyone who actually...
This is also not necessarily true. If you're in a jury, like the juries obviously communicate, and if there's pressure, there's always pressure to like fit in, which is why you get so like many unanimous verdicts. And if you have like a group of 12 people and 8 people feel very strongly about something, they can use pressure, peer pressure, quite literally, to convince the other members of the jury to join in on the decision. There is a natural tendency for humans to disagree. If these 8 black women were set in the beginning of like, we're going to find this guy not guilty because he's black, it's very possible that they could have poisoned the other 4 jurors into agreeing with them. Could be the case. I'm not saying it was the case in this circumstance, but I'm saying like this idea that it doesn't matter at all, that there were some jurors that were quite literally seeking revenge for Rodney King. It absolutely matters. It matters because they could have convinced the other jurors. It matters because of the hung jury problem. This matters for sure.
watched the trial knows that. If you paid attention, you would know that. It was so interesting because I think another thing that he says was OJ was lucky. OJ had the resources. He was lucky that the 2 prosecutors in the case were as inept as they were. That the policemen were as villainous as they were. And that the combination of circumstances allowed a jury which was going to be skeptical of many of these presentations made by the prosecution. So again, it was a perfect storm for the prosecution as well. Bad prosecutors, inept decisions, bad witnesses, and defense attorneys were prepared to exploit every weakness that the prosecution had, and they had many. And I think this is evidenced by the fact that there were points where the prosecution brought forward witnesses, and then during cross-examination, the defense asked them things about their specific case, and then the witness just completely sided with the defense in every way. One of those things was about EDTA.
It's not true.
Where they're asking him, is this consistent with EDTA? And he's an expert on this that they brought in.
Fanatiq doesn't understand EDTA. He thinks that parts per million will kill you. Doesn't.
Prosecution brought in. I think he worked for the FBI.
Mark, would you agree that the pattern that you got on the sock, 2
Roger Martz took his own blood, and it was registering in parts per million for EDTA.
is consistent with the presence of EDTA?
And you can see he's alive with a very large mustache that clearly requires blood to grow, and you can see it is growing quite beautifully. Yeah.
It certainly warrants further testing. It responded like EDTA responded, yes. Is it consistent with the presence of EDTA? Yes.
Afterwards, they go on a recess. When they go,
Of course, it's consistent with EDTA because there was EDTA in the blood. Because parts per million is fine. Like, you're probably going to have people who have blood with parts per million in the EDTA.
on recess, he comes back and has an entirely different tone.
I am not convinced that EDTA is present on that sock. I want to make that perfectly clear. During the break, did you meet with the prosecutors?
Let me look at that. Hold on a second.
I want to make that perfectly clear. During the break, did you meet with the prosecutors?
On recess, he comes back and has an entirely different tone.
I am not convinced that EDTA is present on that sock.
He should have fucking explained this better. I think what he was trying to get at is EDTA is present on the blood, like on the what?
Make that perfectly clear. During the break, did you respond it like EDTA responded? Yes. Is it consistent with the presence of EDTA? Yes.
Afterwards, they go on a
Yes, because it is consistent with the presence of EDTA.
recess. When they go on recess, he comes back and has an entirely different tone.
I am not convinced that EDTA is present on that sock. And I want to make
I'm not convinced that EDTA is present on that sock.
that perfectly clear.
Yeah, this was bad.
During the break, did you meet with the prosecutors?
What he should have said was there was EDTA in the blood, but it can obviously be in parts per million, and that was on the sock too. I think what he was trying to avoid was the insinuation that there was some kind of added preservative, like they added EDTA on the blood on the sock. That was very, very bad. This probably hit the prosecution pretty hard for the jury. But again, it's irrelevant to the actual science of EDTA.
I stepped down and talked with them, yes. You talked to them about your testimony?
This is why you need a good defense attorney. This is exactly the line of questioning you want to be doing, right? He says something that's perceived to be inconsistent, and you fucking hammer him with it. But science be damned. You hammer him with it constantly, and he's going to squirm, and he's going to try to explain himself, but it doesn't look good.
Somewhat. And you recall, after the break, you changed your demeanor, didn't you?
I think I did, yes.
Did you decide at the break that you needed to be much more of an advocate?
No.
Crazy. So you go
Oh, God. It was called the Dream Team for a reason. Very good attorneys. I've said this multiple times. The attorneys were not bad. If you kill somebody, these are the attorneys you want.
on recess, have a conversation with the prosecution, and then now your entire tone changes. I don't know. That was your witness. So they failed because literally everything you tried to do was corrupt and disgusting, and they didn't succeed. I'm not caping for O.J. Simpson because I think he's a great person or anything like that, but I do know this. I've talked about the fact that O.J. Simpson made that statement. I'm not black, I'm O.J. Remember when on the story of O.J. when Jay-Z...
Keep in mind, Fanatiq also, I haven't seen this specifically, so I'm going to withhold my statement on it, but I'm pretty sure there's another famous person that Fanatiq defends. I'll get back to you guys on that one.
He refers to that, and then there's that pregnant pause, and he says, okay, I think there's plenty of evidence that demonstrates that O.J. Simpson was moseying up to white people. He wanted to distance himself from blackness because he thought that his wealth would allow him
I think it was actually said earlier in this video, though, about Bill Cosby, right?
to do so. The second trial, in which there was an invasion, and I think they ended up getting him for something along the lines of false imprisonment because he simply made a statement. No one's going anywhere until we get to the bottom of this. Because he was going back to get memorabilia that actually belonged to him. And when trying to do so, they go to this guy's apartment who was selling memorabilia. The judge later on did mention that, hey, this did rightfully belong to him. Some of the people brought a weapon, someone physically assaulted the guy, and they just got out of hand. O.J.
I got no idea as to this trial. I didn't do research on this robbery trial that he was actually found guilty for. I don't trust Fanatiq's recounting of the trial. My guess is he probably heard about it from somebody, or he watched a few YouTube clips. I don't think he's looked into it. I got no idea what actually happened. Perhaps there could have actually been problems with that trial. I don't know.
Simpson did not know that the person had a weapon, did not tell them that it was physically assault the guy, and only made one statement. No one's going anywhere until we get to the bottom. And that was enough for them to charge him with the assault, charge him with false imprisonment, and give him the long stretch that he got. Mind-boggling, right? Ultimately,
mind-boggling? No, I don't know. We don't know. You didn't present like the evidence. Who knows if it's mind-boggling or not? Maybe he actually deserved prison. Maybe he didn't. That's okay.
I think the O.J. Simpson trial makes it very clear to me that there's still very obvious racism in America. Because
Aha. Now we start getting into the actual motivations for defending O.J.
I think the fact that the media has gone on the assault that it did to tarnish this person's name for all this time, such that now even black people who probably aren't as familiar with it believe it's truly guilty. I think that it's just heinous. It's a disgusting thing. And they do that to all black prominent men, or virtually all. I mean,
they do this to all black prominent men.
Look at Michael Jackson. No evidence whatsoever.
Or almost all.
That dude will never rest in peace, right? Because forever he's going to be
Michael Jackson.
There's no evidence to suggest it. Sure, the FBI conducted an investigation for 10 years, complete with unannounced raids on the property when he was gone, all those kinds of things. He went to trial and had enough evidence, like that they really couldn't convict him, despite confessions from some of the people that lied on him, that they lied on him, despite the idea that now we have evidence of the dad basically threatening him. If you don't give me X amount of money, we're going to destroy your career. He got that, which of course we didn't have at the time, but now we have those recordings. The idea that we have all of that information and still Michael Jackson is like the number one front of all the jokes in They don't let black people die clean in this industry. Bill Cosby. That's all I'll say on that one.
Bill Cosby. He does say Bill Cosby. I knew it. I was waiting for that. Oh, I was like, I knew he said it at some point here. That he defends Bill Cosby. All right. Yeah, so he defends Bill Cosby and O.J. Simpson.
I can probably do a deep dive into the O.J. Simpson trial.
He defends Bill Cosby, who admitted that he did it. Like that, he admitted he did it. He defends him, and then he also defends O.J. Sure. Who supposedly ghost wrote a book called "If I Did It."
Anyone's interested, just let me know in the comments. If you disagree with any, I'm more than willing to brush up on the O.J. Simpson stuff.
No, you're not. You kick me out of panels or debates 1 hour into 2 hours if you want me to educate you on stuff. I ask you specific questions and you don't want to hear it.
Go back over it. I'm more than willing to do that because I am
No, you're not willing to do that.
positive that there's no sound argument to say that O.J. Simpson is guilty. There just is not.
Also, what are you going to go over? Specific YouTube clips that you've seen? What are you saying that you're going to go back over again? Doesn't make any sense.
All the reviewing, all the conversations I had in the past over this subject. Let me know what you think.
All the conversations I had on this subject. All right, we're done with that. Was that comprehensive enough for you guys? Because I'm pretty sure we just comprehensively went through that entire fucking video and addressed each and every claim. Each and every claim. That doesn't mean that there's a good answer for two. I think the only two, which is the why didn't he go right to the lab? He should have done that, right? He probably definitely brain fart moment. And but no, never mind. The pipette, the missing blood, that was perfectly reasonable. I take back that being even a good argument. After watching that video that Fanatiq included, clearly he was not actually positively sure about the 8 milliliters. It was actually, he was sort of on the fence about it. It was probably, oh, I kind of looked at it. That's what he said. That's obviously what he said. So I'm taking that. That's dumb. I'm not even factoring the missing blood at this point. So the fact that he brought the blood against protocol away from the lab, he shouldn't have, or when he took the blood, instead of going directly to the lab, he went to the crime scene and then he went back to the lab. Should have went directly to the lab. That would have been more professional. And then I guess the other thing of the Marks, the agent, who definitely appeared to contradict himself when he went back the second time. Now, the contradiction doesn't actually materially matter, given the fact that his own blood tested parts per million, and you can test in the parts per million and not be dead. So it just doesn't matter. Other than clearly he was a bad witness. He was a bad witness. The strongest point is the blood for sure. IDQ why he's fighting the preservative or anything else. The preservative thing is a losing point, and a lot of the stuff there about like every single sample. He said that very definitively, emphasizing every single sample. It's just fake. It's just false when he says that. Like every single sample is too degraded. Not true. There was 61 blood samples. 59 of them were not even fought over by the defense as being tampered with. There was plenty of blood samples from June 13th, the day of the homicide. And the blood samples tested positive for O.J. Simpson's DNA and Nicole Brown's DNA and Goldman's DNA. It just is what it is. If any of you doubt me, just go look it up, please. And I know that somebody might tell you, well, the facts that you can look up don't matter because you haven't sat through an entire trial that's months long. I don't actually even know if it's months long or not. He just said that. I'm assuming it's months long at the very least here. I'm assuming he's not lying about that too. If somebody tells you like you can't go look, you got to watch you got to go through all of it. You got to go through every single trial, and then they themselves haven't gone through it, but they're asserting that you have to in order to have any kind of reasonable or credible position on the trial. And then they say things that are just factually incorrect. They know nothing. They know nothing about the trial, other than again a few YouTube clips. That's it. That's it. So the reason why we were so animated today is obviously because it's Fanatiq, and how do you not get animated with a debate with Fanatiq? Because oh boy, I mean that is a good faith actor right there. But the other thing is like, if I know that I'm right about something and like somebody's just like blatantly, like brazenly ignoring me, like that pisses me off more than anything else. Like if you morally disagree with me, that's one thing. Like we can have disagreements about that, but like you're just there was DNA that was positive for O.J. Simpson in the blood taken on June 13th. That's just a fact. I don't know what to tell you. Do you want me to prove to you that the Earth is round tomorrow? I mean, that somebody did that to me, that would bother the fuck out of me. Like, I get frustrated trying to explain that to somebody. And so, yeah, I get frustrated. But I think it was good. I think we went over the whole thing. I think if there's any real doubts in the audience, at least my audience, because I was cut off from Fanatiq's audience, which I think really is the audience that probably needs to hear this stuff more. But if there's any doubt that you guys had about O.J. Simpson being guilty, I hope that it's been alleviated. I hope that the crackpot theories and the conspiracy theories and the racism, and I'm going to say this explicitly because I mean it, the racism that exists within the people who found OJ who think that OJ is, there's no evidence that OJ did it. And the jurors, the specific jurors, I'm going to limit this to the specific jurors who said that they voted against prosecution of OJ. They voted against the conviction because of revenge for Rodney King. Those people are horrible racists in the worst way. Not just racist in like, oh, they were mean on the internet, but like a woman was murdered and their priority was getting back at the white man. Absolutely disgusting. That's disgusting. You want moralization? I'll give it to you. That was disgusting. That woman is a bad person, according to me. You guys, you can have whatever opinion you want. She's a bad person. Anybody who would do that's a bad person. So, anyway, what else? What else do we want to talk about? I think we've pretty much gone through everything on the OJ trial. He fucking did it. Oh, let's see if his response is he literally never watched anything on the trial and opened with, I read the entire Wikipedia, so I know a lot. He didn't answer my 2 questions, by the way. We'll see if he does. He won't be able to, but we'll see if he does. I was in both chats. The very few in Fanatiq's room was in full support of him and in surreal denial of any of the points that refuted him. Yeah, true. Hey, just a random question. Any news on the 32-hour work week? I heard the news that Bernie Sanders wants to lessen the workday. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know any news on that. Hasn't Bernie Sanders been advocating for like a 32-hour work week for like 30 years? Wasn't that what he does? Several jurors have reversed their opinions. I know. You're seeing real time responding on Twitter. You guys want to take bets to see if he's even going to respond to the 2 questions? What do you think? Got like 50 cents against. Holy shit, it's past midnight. I did not mean to stay up this late. Bernie Sanders is hilariously dishonest. I remember when he claimed 10K, but yeah, I'm not a fan of Bernie Sanders personally, but I'm just saying he's probably consistently supported the 32-hour work week. I wouldn't put that past him. I mean, he probably has. Remember, I like to deal in facts. Oh, sorry, I read that off Wikipedia. I can't. I don't really know. Anyway, you guys are fantastic. Really appreciate you guys and all the time you give me, and your patience. I don't appreciate you guys trolling me in the second vote. Fuck you. But otherwise, as always. Really do appreciate it. For those of you who gave bits and subs, thank you. Feder, really appreciate the bits as always. And Kerrigan, you gave me you absolute all-star today. Really appreciate that as well. And it helps. It really does help. So thank you. I've always said, look, I'm never going to, I never beg or demand or any of that for subs or bits or anything like that. Because, I mean, it's just, I'm not in the position where I would need to, frankly. But I do appreciate it, and it makes it, it does go back in the stream one way or another, and maybe one day we can become full time. Who knows? Who knows? We'll see. There are some days in which you just want to stream. You don't want to work. Sorry, most days. But it is what it is. I mean, this is a privilege to do, and I try not to take it for granted. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and the donations fund my stream polls. Correct. That's right. We're gonna go ahead and rate on out into somebody. Who do we want to rate on out into? I'm thinking Gibbs. We've done Gibbs like the last many times. Yeah, I'm not necessarily opposed to doing it again. I could probably rate on out into Fanatiq, but then he would just mute all of you if you fought him, or I'm guessing if you did. Yeah, good night, Feder. Thank you so much. You guys want? I'm gonna leave it up to you guys. I'm gonna do another poll. Maybe. Who knows? I apparently can't predict polls anymore. So the poll is in. I'm gonna vote Gibbs. So you guys are gonna have to at least overpower my vote. Good luck. But you guys fucking see that I'm right about this? Like, duh. Ooh, 2-3. Ico, it's not as close as you think it is. You're saying it was going to be for sure Fanatiq. We're all going to say Fanatiq. OJ being guilty is not exactly a hot take. Yeah, I know. I know. I just. But see, I think this is what it is. Is this how people feel when they argue with me? Like, I have like the take that people think is crazy. And then like there's like, well, how can you fucking think this? And then I'm like saying, no. Like, you hear me? Like, I know I'm right. Is this how it goes? If it's 50-50, I'm flipping a coin, just so you guys know. And I'm sure I have a coin somewhere. You're so naive. This is Twitch chat. Yeah, true. It's true that you and Fanatiq are both bullet biters. But Aiko, can you at least agree that my insanity is based on like my moral propositions as opposed to like my belief about factual reality, right? Like if somebody proves like, hey, factually this is the case, I will accept that, right? At the very least, right? I'm not going to be like, no, it's parts per billion, not parts per million. Wait. Seriously, there used to be a TOS rule in hate raids. Not saying you're doing that, but don't let anybody accuse you and... Let me Google that. Hold on. Harassment of any kind, whether it be in the form of hate raids, malicious spam, or other targeted attacks, is against our community guidelines and counter to our community values. No, I'm going to have to write on out into Gibbs. The only reason being is I don't think you guys are going to be hateful. But like, he's definitely going to say that it's hateful. And I don't trust Fanatiq. I just don't. So, change the vote to Gibbs. Don't want to risk TOS. Yeah, we're going to do Gibbs. We like Gibbs. It's definitely not a hate raid for him. But, and arguably, I obviously would never encourage people to break TOS or to do something mean to somebody. But like, just someone's got to talk reality into people. Rip OJ, man, pushed over for 10,000 yards. I heard he was a really fucking good running back, by the way. Like, dude killed somebody or multiple people, but he was he could run. He could run with a ball. And, somebody once asked me, is like, well, let's say he did kill somebody. Like, wouldn't all the hours of entertainment provided by being such a good running back potentially outweigh that? I don't know. That's an interesting moral argument. See, that's like that's the crazy moral takes, Ico, that I'm like, that could be some, I don't say that, but that could be something that I would say. Like, yeah, like he did, but like, who cares because of this other thing? That's the crazy shit that I do, not like just denying reality. I don't do that. All right, writing out into our good friend and comrade Admiral Gibbs. When you get in there, ask him if he thinks OJ did it. I need to know. Okay, thanks.
Beneath